Okay, good evening, everyone. This is Lori Charlton. It's November 22nd, 2022. I want to welcome everyone to the quarterly meeting of the Board of Finance. I'll call the meeting to order and ask that we rise while our colleague, Ms. Marmion, leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance. We have two board members that are still trying to join us remotely, just for everyone's information. We're having some glitches trying to get them in, so hopefully they'll be able to join us shortly. To the members of the public who've dialed in or joined us on the WebEx tonight, please know that you are muted and will not be heard by board members. Typically, we invite live public comment during meetings when there are voting items on the agenda. This evening, we'll invite public comment on items 3 and 4. For anyone joining the meeting remotely who wishes to comment on either of those two agenda items, please indicate so in the chat box now or at any time before the items are heard. You will be recognized to speak at the appropriate time, and we ask that you provide your name and address for the record and limit your statement to 2 minutes. As always, members of the public are encouraged to send their comments and questions in writing to the board at bof@fairfieldct.org. And if you do so, please remember to include your name and address for the record as you would with live comment. Tonight is our quarterly meeting. The first quarter of the fiscal 22-23 year ended on September 30th. And our agenda tonight includes a budget to actual review from each of Fairfield Public Schools and the town administration as of Q1. We'll also hear an update on the status of capital projects, including those funded by the town's ARPA grant. In addition, we'll hear an update on the financial status of the town's internal service fund as of June 30th, which is its fiscal year end. For the benefit of the public, the internal service fund is a separate entity from the town's general fund, and it's used to account for costs related to active employee health insurance for town employees, workers' compensation claims, and estimated liabilities for litigation. The fiscal year-end numbers for this fund were not available when we had our year-end update in October, so we will be reviewing those tonight. Before we get to the quarterly review, we do have two interrelated voting items for the East Trunk Wetlands Crossing Project, the WPCA project, and those items cover requested appropriations and approval of the funding sources. So with that, I will move to item 3. To hear, consider, and adopt a bond resolution as requested by the Board of Selectmen entitled a resolution appropriating $6,250,000 for costs associated with the inspection and construction phase of the East Trunk Wetlands Crossing Project, authorizing a grant to reimburse $750,000 of such appropriation, and authorizing the issuance of bonds in an amount not to exceed $2 million to finance a portion of such appropriation. This item also requires RTM approval. Can I have a motion to put this item before us? Mr. Stark, seconded by Mr. Curley. Okay, the backup materials for this item include the bond resolution, which is on page 1 of the posted backup, the 14-point summary, which is on page 6, the construction cost summary beginning on page 8, and materials related to cost estimates for design and construction management services on page 13. Those materials are followed in the backup by a map of the project area and relevant minutes from the WPCA board. So I see Mr. Hurley here tonight. Bill, are you going to do the honors? All right. Hold the button.
The one at Independence Hall, you just press it once, so I was all confused. Anyway, hello everyone, I'm Bill Hurley, the engineering manager. I'm going to present the East Trunk Sewer Metro Wetlands Crossing. We do have a member, Joe, of the Sewer Commission, and I also have John Bodie trying to get on, but if there's a specific question, I can text him the question, and we can get a response, or we can wait, if it's a minor one, till later. The East Trunk Sewer Wetlands Metro Wetlands Crossing is a construction and inspection phase. The total project cost, including contingency, is $6.25 million. The total share would be $5.5 million, broken down as $3.5 million to come out of the WPCA fund balance and $2 million to be bonded. We were able to get a $750,000 Urban Act grant, and so that was a way that we reduced some of the cost. A quick background would be that the East Trunk Sewer Wetlands Crossing project will replace 311 linear feet of existing 33-inch sanitary sewer pipe with a new 36-inch pipe along the same alignment within the embankment of the Ash Creek Inlet wetlands next to the Metro Center. This project will reduce I&I inflow and infiltration, reduce sanitary sewer system overflows, and increase capacity for future development. The design services were awarded to D&B engineers back in April of 2021, and the construction plans are essentially completed. Permits have been obtained, and we can start construction once we get the approvals. The purpose of the project is to replace the sewer main that carries about 2/3 of the town's sewer flows to the wastewater treatment plant. And as I mentioned before, the new 36-inch line will expand capacity for Metro Center development and provide necessary improvements to the system. The request includes construction of the sewer and design services during construction, specific and specialized inspections, environmental inspection, and daily inspections as well. The reliability cost estimate is based on the latest information supplied by our consultant for construction and inspection costs, and are based on the number of days using the 16-month worst-case scenario project timeline. So I think that's a pretty good recap, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. I want to turn it over to the board for questions, but before I do that, can you just connect the dots on the backup in terms of how we get to the 6250? There's a couple of pieces of information here, but I wasn't sure if anybody else was clear how they add up to the total authorization.
Just give me a second to get organized here.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to try to go by memory here, but the cost of the construction was estimated at $5.7 million, and the cost of, $5.6 million, or $5.5 million, and $750,000 was the cost for inspection and all the inspections that we have.
Okay, so
the breakdown of the 6.25 would be of three components. Working backwards is the 3.5 would come from the WPCA fund balance, $2 million of it would be bonded, and the $750,000 came out of the grant.
Okay, yeah, the funding sources were clear. I guess to clarify what I think the board has two pieces of backup. One is this, it says project summary conceptual estimate. So I see a few numbers on there, but I think the 5.5 you referred to is on page 4, And then we have another document, which is the D&B report, and so they've got some extra costs there. So I wasn't sure if we're supposed to add those two together, or if we did, how they get to the total appropriation amount. I mean, if you want to take a minute to figure that out, that's fine, but I just want to make sure we have all the backup and understand the pieces. I didn't know if there was some contingency hanging around here that made up the balance or what.
Okay, I'm going to attempt this. In the packet, the conceptual estimate in the packet, it says 5.25 million, and that says page 5 of 5. Okay, and then from that, and I have to double check if for some reason, oh, here it is, I'm sorry. If you go to page, that's what was confusing me. Page 4 of 5, I don't know why the way they did this. Page 5 of 5 says 5.2 million. It's page 4 that has the 5.5 million. So that part I got, and then from there, if you go, so that's the construction. Page 4 is 5.5 million, and it did have, it has some contingency in there. And then if we go to a couple more pages where it says page 3, which is about 4 pages away from where I think it says D&B engineers and architects. And on the 3rd page, it says that D&B proposal is $685,000. And then from there, there's also Lorero Engineering, which the licensed environmental professional, so they have to be included as well, and so that's how we got the 6.25.
Okay, so I have 5512 from the project summary. 685,000 is the high end of the range from the,
It's the same for me. Oh, no.
Oh, there they are.
right, and then that gives 6.197, and then we get to 62, what was it, 6250. There's another piece here that we don't have backup for. Okay.
That's correct. It's a small piece, but that's what added up to the 6.25.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Thank you for taking us through that. Okay, questions from the board?
Can the board hear us?
Yes. We can hear you.
Finally, hey.
Hey.
I didn't realize that you guys weren't waiting for the members to log in, so what item are we on?
Yeah, we are on item 3, so we just got an overview of the 14 points on the East Trunk project, and we're starting to take questions from the board. Chris, maybe you can see if Ms. LeClaire text help. I don't know if you want to text her. She's probably having the same problem you had. Okay, questions from the board. Mr. Stark.
Is this the same item that was on our agenda back in June, but then got withdrawn in the amount of 2.4 million? I'm just looking back at our.
Yes, that's
Backup from-
correct.
Okay.
We were a little shocked at the revised estimate, to be honest with you.
Right, and any sense of where it kind of blew up in cost?
Supply chain issues and further engineering to get to that figure. They also added the contingency. The 2.4 may or may not have had the contingency. I thought it did, but it may not have.
Okay. Any follow-up, Mr. Stark? Okay. Mr. Walsh?
How you doing, Bill? I'm having a hard
evening.
time with the follow-up to Mr. Stark's question. There is a 200% increase to the numbers. How is that even possible? How is that estimate even remotely possible that it would go up from 2 million to 6 million? What supply chain issues are we having? I don't even understand what we're talking about. Are you saying that the pipe itself has gone up by that much? Can you understand the confusion we're having here? I mean, we've never had estimates that have been this far off. And, you know, when we get something, okay, I could understand even with inflation at 8%, even for a couple of years. But you're talking about a 200%. It almost seems like someone never even looked at this, or that this is a completely different project. It's just like outer space numbers.
As like I said before, we were shocked on it. We've reviewed these numbers. It's, as you know, with the bids coming in, we've had sidewalks projects that have, you know, doubled in cost. Some of the other projects have gone up as well. There's trenching involved here. There's what they call soldier piles. There's the price of the pipe. All that has basically doubled or tripled, and the worst case is labor costs, I think, have also gone up tremendously. What we're hoping, but again, I can't promise, we're going by the worst case. If the project only lasts 13 months, well, that might reduce, you know, some of those figures. We're also hoping that the contingencies that were added in are a little excessive. I mean, just like you, when we had the estimate was about 6 or 8 months ago, we were expecting maybe to go up to 3 million or 3.5 million. This is what, as I said, this was our latest estimate, and this is what they're going by. Obviously, the bids will dictate, you know, whether the estimate is low or high. It's all that we can go by. And when we put the thing out to bid is when we will have, you know, the true costs. I'm trying to think of here, as a material cost bidding contingency, 10%. Contractor overhead, 10%. Design contingency, 5%. Bonds and insurance, 5%. So those are some of the ones that we're hoping are either not needed or a little bit less than what's proposed. What we did want to do is, you know, go back to the 2.4 million, ignore the consultant's estimate, and then have the bids go through the roof and then have to come back to all the boards.
Who did the original estimate at 2.4?
That was D&B as well.
Okay, so really we need to talk to them. Can we get them at a future meeting?
I can try to arrange that. The only caveat I would have is the 2.4 was not as detailed. This one, as I said, this estimate had like 4 or 5 pages to it. The other one might have been half a page when they did it 6, 8 months ago.
Okay, so in 6 to 8 months, it's gone up from 2 million to an additional $4 million. By the time this goes out to bid, I guess there's a possibility it can go up another 200%. Who knows? So we can then be going up to $18 million. Because if the $6 million happens to be wrong by D&B, it can really go to $18 million. Because obviously they didn't spend a lot of time with their numbers the first time around. We've seen this on school projects. Not the first time we've seen this happen. You know, we had an architect in town here promise us on Riverfield it would be a specific amount. He put his professional reputation on the line, and it turned out to be like 200% more than he said it was going to be. So I get concerned when I see we're using companies like D&B, and in 4 to 6 months, we're going up by $4 million on a number. It's scary. It's like, how do you even rely on this number?
Well, not to bring up a sour point, but you might recall, and it will be here before the boards probably in a couple of months. We're hoping to get grant money for that one. But the East Trunk Sewer Line was the same thing. We had an initial estimate of 2.5 million, and now it's somewhere between 8 and 9, maybe even 10 million, depending on contingencies and whatever. And Tom Flynn had brought it up at the Board of Selectmen meeting where there's a lot of water pollution control authority projects coming up, and we're going to have to address them.
Yeah, the question is, how do we address them, and how do we get better estimates? Because the one you're talking about, the previous one that now is like $8 million. Is that the one that is going to be servicing Sacred Heart University?
No, that's actually, this is just downstream from this
Okay.
project.
Okay. So the other question I have is that, we've handled another matter about a month ago having to do with a Parks and Rec project where it went up by 100%. And we punted on that one because I don't think there's any economist out there saying we're not going to have a recession coming, which will probably drive down costs. So tell me why we need to approve this today and why we shouldn't wait for better pricing in 6 months to a year from now.
We had that approach 2 years ago, too, and
Yep.
it backfired, to be honest with
No,
you.
I get you,
yeah.
but with a
It-
recession
it's-
staring
it's-
us in the
it's-
face and
it's
hearing about it
crossed-
every day.
It's crossed my mind, and, I can ask Joe or John to chime in, but it also has to do with the, development of the Metro Center property, and for this one here, there is that $750,000 grant that has been extended already 3 times. And so, obviously, we don't want to lose that, but the points you're making, I'm not going to disagree with them. But if we wait and the prices continue to go up, then we're in a worse of a hole. I don't have the answer to it. The only thing I could tell you is on these estimates, it is frustrating, but we've had 3 different projects. You mentioned the other one as well. 3 different engineering firms, and all 3 of them have been, low to begin with and then have the prices go up. So unfortunately, it was even happening before COVID. The price of steel, the price of construction materials had gone up significantly there, and then COVID just made it worse. And now, as you know, trying to, even when we go out to bid, sometimes we can only get 1 or 2 bidders because every quote, good contractor is busy.
I think some of that probably has to do with some of this ARPA funding that's out there and all the billions and billions of dollars that are probably out there and everybody competing for the same services from these contractors that are being used, which is probably also driving the price up. Is there a need that it has to happen now?
Absolute need. I would think that we want to get this project done sooner than later. I mean, if delaying it a month or 2, I don't know if it's going to change. You want to delay it a year, then I think you might be right on that, but then there might be other factors that are involved, and we run the risk of holding up development of the Metro Center, losing the grant, and other possibilities as well. Another issue I mentioned before was the sanitary sewer overflows. Right now, we have the Long Island Sound people are they're constantly looking at municipalities to improve water quality, and unrelated to us, but I believe they've made Ridgefield do 62 miles of sanitary sewer because of the sanitary sewer overflows, and there were 1 or 2 other towns that they happened to go after. And so that's another fear that we have, is that this area is known, the East Trunk Sewer Line is known for sanitary sewer overflows. And obviously, we're talking these costs. I can't imagine what 62 miles of sanitary sewer would cost.
When you say the Metro Center, this servicing the Metro Center, what percentage of the cost? Is this just the Metro Center or all the development of those apartments going up all around the Metro Center? Or is it just specifically what's planned at the Metro Center?
It would be basically for any future development or immediate development that's in the area. Some of the ones that have recently built and they're, they're filling in some of the transit-oriented development. The Metro Center, as I mentioned before, 2/3 of the town's sewer flows go into this line. And so that's where this has a little bit more of a serious component. The other thing, I mean, I don't know, I'd have to check with purchasing. If you would approve the money, the RTM approved the money, we put the thing out to bid, and let's say the bids are even higher, then we could reject it, and then we can, take a chance. If the bids are a little bit lower, or even if it's $1 million lower, because they maybe have added a little bit of contingency and maybe overestimating, because maybe this company in the past has had an issue of being under from the last couple of years, then maybe we're okay with it. I honestly don't know. It's just that we have a problem of pushing some of these projects further and further back, and we're trying to address them. I know the timing's not the greatest.
The projects that surround the Metro Center, looks like 1,000 apartments, maybe 2,000 apartments that have been added in the last couple of years. Do they have to pay, the developers have to pay any money into the WPCA when they open up? And how much money have you made from that, and what have you done with that money?
Yeah, Jim, Joe DeVanzo, Vice Chair of the Commission, WPCA Commission. Yeah, Jim, developers pay an I&I fee, and specifically, there was a surcharge on the Metro group. They've changed hands 2 or 3 times, but we asked them for an additional, I believe it was $100,000. We do that typically. When we did Sacred Heart, we asked them for $1 million when we put the pump stations up there. So yes, we do extract some benefit from the developers.
But can you give us a range on the apartment buildings like Aldo? I mean, that's a huge development of apartments. Like, all those apartment buildings that have popped up, looks like 1,000 to me. I mean, it's multiple developments and more are coming. But how much have we made from those surrounding development of those parcels that we could justify that they paid in to have work like this done?
Okay, I'm going to hedge on that a bit. For a 2-bedroom apartment, we charge them $4,200 now. For a 3-bedroom, $5,500. So I'm not going to do the math for you, but we do have a charge in there. If it's a studio, it's 30. Don't quote me on this because we just raised the rates about 3 months ago. But about in the 3,000 range for a studio, 42 or 4,600 for a 2-bedroom, and then 5,500 for a 3-bedroom. And we call that the I&I fee. And before we'll give them a permit, a desk permit, they have to pay that fee to us.
And that I&I fee goes into your surplus, correct?
That is correct.
And that's one of the reasons why your surplus has been growing, right? I mean, because there's been not just that trunk line, but around town there's been all sorts of,
All developers, Anchorage,
Yep, yep.
79 Umpqua, all developers pay a rate into our fund, the I&I fee.
Okay, I'll pass this. I've asked enough questions right now, but I might want to come back. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Walsh.
If-
Mr. Curley?
Yeah, I just want to highlight on page 2 where they do explain some of their conceptual estimates. They use the RS Means database and historic databases for that. RS Means is one of the typical construction estimate programs. Labor rates were based on prevailing wage rates from July 2022. The RS Means 2022 equipment rate labels and tables. Expected accuracies range from 15 to 30 on the low side to 20 to 50% on the high side for some of the estimates. And then they have the notice to proceed was anticipated for December 2022 with a 16-month duration. As I said, the project is expected to be 13 to 16 months. Escalation was calculated from October 2022 to a midpoint of construction for August 2023 at 5% per annum compounded. And then due to recent increases and fluctuation in construction materials, a 10% contingency factor was added to the estimate. So that's some of the things. I hope that explains some of it.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley. Mr. Curley?
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair.
It's Hurley and Curley again.
Good to see you. I just want to follow up on some of Mr. Walsh's comments. I agree that a number that goes from 2 million to 6 million in a matter of months is alarming. I guess I just want to confirm, not so much on the cost side of the equation, but the need side. If we were to delay, if we were to consider possibly looking at this after we get into this recession that everyone's waiting for and perhaps the cost comes down, if that was something that we considered, I want to understand the need side of this. Does this slow down development? Does this cause services problems? I think I heard 2/3 of the town sewage goes through this line. So I want to understand the need. What happens if this doesn't happen? Not so much from a expense or cost side, but more from a services side.
Craig, two things happen with this specific line. One is its I&I, its infiltration is significant. When we have overflows, it's right near Long Island Sound. We have a different issue there. But you are right on target with the fact that we need this for capacity from that side of town. And I want to just make sure that Jim understands this is one part of this line. We're going to be coming back to this committee, to this commission, to this board, with an additional request for the trunk line, which is also in front of Metro, south of 95, which will hook into this line. Okay? Two things. One reason we're asking for it now is the grant money, the potential of losing that grant money. So we need the capacity. We'd like to fix the problem we're going to have with Long Island Sound and the grant money.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you for that insight. I believe about 3 years ago, the town published in October of 2019 a transit-oriented development study. A lot of time and energy and effort went into that. I think the projections went out in 5-year increments in terms of what that development looked like for the next 5 years, 10, 15, 20. Where are we now in relation to that study, and are we keeping up with it? Are we falling behind? Does this get us to where we need to be, or is that plan now obsolete?
Well, I'm not sure the plan is obsolete. I'm not privy to that. But this, with the two pieces of this project, it would get us the capacity to meet that plan. Meaning the project what we're asking for right now, plus the rest of the Metro project south of 95. Beyond that, there's another, the Kings Highway project that hooks into this line that we're going to be coming back to you. Thank you. Okay. The Kings Highway line, and I think you just saw it in the paper.
Press the button on your, yeah.
Okay. Which is the third leg of this plan to support the town plan.
Okay, so what is the timing on that second and third leg? And are there only 3 legs, or do we have a 5-legged thing coming at us?
Well, the Kings Highway, the section that's about 2,600 feet immediately south of this location is scheduled to probably show up before the boards sometime in the spring. As we're wrapping up that design, we have to just revise the design a little bit because it's a little outdated now, 3-4 years ago. again, we waited on that one, hoping the costs would go down, and it backfired.
It's not Kings Highway.
No, that's the south one. Well, I wanted.
That's not
yeah.
Kings Highway.
Yeah,
What he
no.
was just talking about
Was the
is south of
right.
95.
Yeah, I'm going to do both. Because this one, this one here is immediately south, and we have a pending grant application in right now to the state for that section. We're hoping to get millions of dollars for that grant. By postponing this one, I don't know if that would affect it. That's something we'd have to consider, because when we applied for the grant, we said that we were doing this one as well in conjunction. So I just want to, again, highlight that as well. And that one, as I said, we just have to update, tweak that, and that one would probably go out to construction realistically late spring or summer of 2023. And then the next section, Kings Highway, that's the section north of this area. And that one, we have that one scheduled for design of 2024 and construction for 2025.
These are all in the current waterfall?
Yes, they
Yeah,
are.
okay.
What are
The
they?
question's
In
at
what
level?
amount? In
What
what
level?
amount?
At what amount,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
Well, I guess meaning, I'm not sure if they could be, they're in there at some amount. Whether those amounts are accurate, I guess, is the question based on what we're seeing here. But I understand. And just so everyone's aware, Mr. Schmidt's not here tonight. I guess I can say he got diagnosed with COVID today, so he's not with us. But I've been speaking with him about having a separate meeting for these WPCA projects. We have, I think, a lot of important things to discuss. I personally would better like to understand the revenue that you talked about, and the breakout between regular sewer user fees and these other charges. We want to understand the capital projects that are on the horizon more holistically. So I know that there's a plan to try to do that for this board, so that we keep that conversation out of the budget process and can focus on it on its own. So I expect more of that to come. Mr. Curley, did you get an answer to your question? Are you satisfied with that? Because I sort of had the same question. I'm not so convinced that prices will come down if there's a recession or not, just given, Jim, you alluded to the ARPA money, there's the infrastructure money out there now, and the cost of commodities, who knows? So I'm concerned about the impact that a delay might have, not only on the future costs, but really on the other problems that could arise if this is delayed. And we are definitely going to have other projects before us that we're going to talk about, expensive ones. And so I think it might be wise to, as we move into that phase, talk about those in a, outside of a process like this, where something just before us for a vote, where we have a chance to actually look at the broader picture before individual items are coming before us for a spending authorization. So, that's my concern. But did you get what you needed? Okay. Do other questions from board members? Mr. Testani.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, Bill, how are you? How you doing? Just to follow up the same line of questioning, and I'm not trying to hold your feet to the fire, but there's been kind of a theme of, could we wait? What would be the worst case scenario? Would it be 3 months, 6? Is it too hard to estimate? If we did decide as a board to table this, let's say, what would be the ramifications of waiting, or could you give a guesstimate on that?
Joe made a good point. If we push this one, we'll have to push the next one as well, because
They're
one of the
kinda connected.
reasons that the prices are higher too is, don't forget, we're going to have a 33-inch sewer line full of sewage that we also have to bypass pumps, as we construct that section. And so that all has to be pumped to another manhole, and that manhole is immediately downstream. And that manhole is the beginning of the next project. So we would have, if we postpone this, we'll have to postpone the other. Honestly, if 1 month or whatever, is it going to make a difference? But I don't think it's going to make a difference in cost. It might give us a better idea because the other grant is supposed to be awarded, I think they were aiming for like for the announcement, the first week in December. And so, preliminary, I have an idea of how much we might get, but I don't want to say that publicly because it was only in a phone conversation, and I'm not even sure if we'll get the grant, but things are looking pretty good for that. But I can't publicly say until they make the announcement.
Okay, and I just have a couple of other things. You talked about the existing situation, and it's referenced in the very first page in the D&B engineers and architects under project background. So is it fair to say that the sentence says, D&B understands that the primary construction items include work associated with the excavation, demolition, and removal of the existing 33-inch reinforced concrete gravity sewer? So that piece of the project is part of this quote, is that fair to say?
Yes, it'll be in the same alignment that's the existing. So they have a temporary, that's what the soldier pile is for, is they have a temporary that they'll put next to it. And then when they're completed with the project, or as they go along, they'll remove the old pipe, existing pipe. Yeah, the other thing, I think we're covered for a little while or a short term, but obviously, some of the permits that we are able to obtain, you got to be careful of their timelines. We can't let them expire. Usually, they do grant you an extension, but, not always.
Okay, and I'm curious about how you came up with the division of the funds for this expenditure. So you've got, if I understand it correctly, 3.5 million, right, from the WPCA. 2 million is the bonded piece, right? And 750,000 is the grant. So just out of my curiosity's sake, how did you come up with that division of money?
Typically, Jack, what happens is the WPCA the use of our funds is primarily for I&I, relieve I&I from it. So we typically would have paid for all of this, theoretically, through our funds. Talking to Jared, he felt that, I think, and I didn't talk to him directly, but the message came back to us that he wanted to bond some of it. He didn't want to bond all of it because he's worried about the town level of bonding, but he felt that we should bond some of it. A piece of this is for capacity, a piece of this is for the I&I. So we sort of said, okay, let's split it. We didn't split it 50-50, but let's split it. We're paying the whole thing. We're going to pay the bond servicing at the end of the day. So we're going to put 3.7 million or 3.5 million out of our fund, and then we're going to pay the bond servicing on the other 2 million.
Where does that leave the WPCA funding after this is appropriated? Do you have an idea of what's left? Or what the surplus is, I should say?
Yeah, I do have the numbers right here in front of me. It's a continuous flow because we put money into the fund and we take money out of the fund. So I can share with you the numbers, but I mean, if we take 3 million out of the fund and it's 13.7,
It's just going to replenish itself.
9 million in that range. We have a few other things happening at the same time. We have some money going into it from I&I, from insurance, some other things. So it's a free flow. I could tell you that the fund, based on our current projections, which includes approving this, at the end of 2023 would be about 6.5 million.
At the end of 2023, after this is appropriated, correct?
Yeah, this, and there's a digester repair. We've got the Fairfield Beach pump station, Fairfield Beach, which has already been approved. Force Main. So we have those projects happening this year. Okay, so we start off with 13.7 and we start reducing from there. But if we get all our projects done, the way they're lined up to be done, we'd have about $6.5 million at the end of this year, 23.
Okay, so that doesn't include the other two pieces to this project that we've been talking about, correct?
Oh, no, the other two pieces, the Kings Highway trunk design is in 24, the Kings Highway is in 25, and the Phase 1 of the section below 95 is in 24, and Phase 2 is early 25.
Thank you. Right, gotcha. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Testani. Mr. Curley?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to follow up on, I want to make sure I heard you correctly. Typically, these projects would be fully funded out of your fund and not bonded. Did I hear that correctly?
Typically, the one use we just always do is I&I out of our fund. So you heard that part correctly. This pipe under Ash Creek is both an I&I issue and a capacity issue for all the development that's going on there. So that's why we're not, that was the rationale of not funding 100% of it out of the fund, because it also has that other piece to it.
Understood, and that's a good clarification. I appreciate that. I feel like we're operating with half the information. I'm curious as to more the fund balance that you have, and that you mentioned the $6 million at the end of this period. Do you have a target fund balance? Where is the fund balance in relation to where it's been historically? Are you comfortable that you've got good coverage there? I feel like we're operating with half the information here.
Okay, that's a multi-part question. I'm never happy that we have full coverage. For example, the digester blew, I assume you're aware of it, and that is a significant part of our issue. I mean, you're going to be, we're going to come back to you and approve maybe another $2 million for the fix of it. $600 to clean it, $1 million on the insurance side, so you got all those pieces moving around. You know, if I take the waterfall as presented to the town, we are actually at a fund balance by the end of 2027. And that's including continuing to put in through our rate structure and continuing to collect I&I.
So you're projecting to run that balance to zero by 2027, even with your current fee structure?
That is correct. If I take the current town waterfall, yes, that fund balance would be gone.
Does that suggest that perhaps you should be asking to bond more and split this a little differently? I imagine that you want to have some type of reserve that doesn't go to zero by 2027.
Well, I think we're going to be challenged to bring in some more revenue, whether that's going to be surcharges. We're discussing other options to bring in revenue before we ever reach 2027. Our commission will be looking at what else we can be bringing in to the fund. But the way the fund's structured right now, where we get our revenue, our rate structure, our I&I structure, it would run out at the end of 2027.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Mr. DeWitt has been waiting, but you'll be happy to know that I kind of have an answer to some of your questions. So I actually looked at the historical fund balance, and if you go back 10 years or so, I'll just tell you the numbers. It was $3 million starting in 2022, or 2012 rather. 3 million, 3 million, up to 4 million in 2014, 5 million in 2015, 2016, 2017, it jumped up to 7 million. 8 million in 2018, and it's been hovering 8 million, 9 million, and at the end of 2021, it went up to 12 million. So it's actually, the 13 million is quite high compared to the historical level. And that's not been the level that that the WPCA fund balance has been at. So if that's helpful. I think, one of the things that, talking about having a more holistic look at, the plan, I think this is helpful to understand too. What, as Mr. Curley said, what is the target? How are we going to, how is this going to work? In terms of revenues, what's going to have to be gotten through, regular rates for, everybody's sewer bill versus, some of these other fee opportunities, et cetera. So I think, understanding this is an important piece of the big picture. And I do believe Mr. Flynn raised that same issue at the Board of Selectmen, that let's go ahead and approve this, but before we get to the next one, let's make sure that we have a more fulsome understanding of what's on the horizon. And I know your board does. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but when these things come before us piecemeal, it's just a little bit harder, particularly when the estimates vary so significantly from what we've been seeing on the waterfall all these years. So I'll leave it at that, but I do want to get to Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris DeWitt. This is an incredibly frustrating conversation for me tonight. I agree with Mr. Curley that we have half the data. In fact, you know what? I don't even think we have half the data. And part of the reason we don't have it is because I haven't seen a waterfall in 2 years. And Mr. Hurley, so let me be clear, Mr. Hurley talks about the town waterfall. I have no idea what that is or what's on that. And this is the reason that we always had these discussions. Right now, I would be having that waterfall chart open in front of me and saying, wait a minute, Bill, you told me this was going to be this number, and I don't have that anymore. So incredibly frustrating. It's incredibly frustrating to me, too, Mr. Hurley, when you say that a one-page quote is less accurate than a 5-page quote. That is incredibly frustrating. They are the exact same. It could be 1,000 pages versus 1 page. They're the exact same thing. So my question is, how many bids were received, or how many bids were received for this job?
Chris, you might not have heard, we have not put this out to bid yet. All this information was based on the consultant's latest estimate. We were shocked just as much as you were. It does include significant contingency and some varying amounts of fluctuation in cost escalations, but...
you don't need to go through that again.
Yeah.
So you
Okay.
don't have any bids. Okay, fine.
Yeah, no, there's no bids.
Chris? Chris, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes.
This is the process we go through. This is your process. We have to get approval to get a number so we can get purchasing, to get a spec out so we can get bids. We'll come back with the bids and you'll have another bite at the apple. But it's the process. It's not Bill's issue that we have to come here with an estimate.
I understand the process, okay? I missed the beginning of the meeting, so I apologize.
Sorry, I didn't realize.
And Ms. Charlton, I heard Mr. Flynn's comment too about, pushing this forward, but the next time. But Jesus, there's always a next time, and they don't ever seem to change. So I'm on the fence with this, and frankly, everything Mr. Walsh said, I gotta just go along with it. This is incredibly frustrating. I have no idea where I'm going with this one. I really don't. And if we do push, I'm not talking about pushing a month. We're pushing a year, because I think Mr. Walsh is right. I think in a year from now, people are going to be begging us to do this, and somebody's going to be sitting here with a $5 million quote going, oh, look at these guys. They signed up way before this recession started. So I could be wrong, but I really don't know what to do with this one. So thank you. Sorry for my ranting, Madam Chair.
That's okay, Chris. I just want to point out that a lot of times the WPCA has their own waterfall chart. So when I do I'm just going to defend myself a little bit. When I do on behalf of the engineering department and DPW, we have our own waterfall chart that it's not related to the WPCF. I'm just using this opportunity to assist them. knowing that we have a lot of projects, the WPCA on board, and that is one of the reasons why that fund balance had gone up. They had known that a lot of these projects were going to happen. What we didn't know is that the prices were going to escalate, unfortunately. Yeah, you have every right. You want to delay the project, so be it. But I'm just going to tell you, the Water Pollution Control Facility, or the authority, I'm sorry, had that same process in 2019 because the East Trunk Sewer Line went from 2.5 million to 5 million, and now it's at about 8 or 9 million. So we don't know. Nobody has a crystal ball. We don't know, but that was the same philosophy that the WPCA had a couple of years ago. Let's wait it out, and unfortunately, it hasn't been the case. I don't. Nobody knows really. So, I want to make that point.
Thank you. And just for Mr. Devanza, I just want to clarify, we don't get another bite at the apple. Once we approve the money, we approve the money. Bids then happen, and the only time it ever comes back to us is if the bid is, blows the initial estimate out of the water and you're going to ask for more money. If it's within it, that's it, we're done. So we don't really see what happens. I mean, we have a new process that we've been put in place. In fact, we're supposed to get an update tonight on the status of projects that have been approved, but that doesn't happen that way. And to Mr. DeWitt's point, I think the waterfall situation is frustrating for everyone. We didn't go through our normal process last year. We're in the process this year through this capital planning workshop, but it's going to be January before we see a waterfall. So this board, and that's important because obviously there are projects throughout the town on that waterfall. In addition to yours. So I think that's part of the struggle here. Let me, Ms. Marmion, you had a question?
Thank you. I have a question, and it may not be for the two of you, but I'm wondering if when we say we're at capacity and that we have to make a bigger pipe, basically a wider pipe, do we know, are we precluded from additional development in the metro area in terms of, are we able from we build things and hopefully we get revenue from them. Are we going to have to limit development moving forward in this area because we're at capacity?
And the answer to that is yes. The example is 15 Umpqua. There is a calculation our engineers do, and if our pipe gets to 80% or higher with that calculation, typically we will turn down the project. So the WPCA actually turned down 15 Umpqua because we had an 8-inch pipe in the road, and that pipe couldn't handle Anchorage, 79, Umpqua Place, the schools which came down through there. And what happened is the developer offered to replace the pipe. Then he found out all the utilities were in the street, and it was going to be $1 million project to replace an 8-inch pipe to 80 feet. And he changed his attorney, and they went to the to planning and zoning, and now they are suing. We're in court with them. At least we were taking depositions. So yes, the answer to your question is yes. We would turn down projects if we do the calculation and there's not enough capacity.
Okay, so thank you for that. That makes a lot of sense to me. My other question is just in terms of your timing here, again, we're talking about supply chain. I know prices have gone up, et cetera, but do we have really any good idea if this went out to bid and if we went forward based on your timing? The piping may not be available regardless, correct?
There's that possibility. Some of the supply chain is leveling off in terms of the supply is catching up, is what I mean by that. And in some cases, we have been able to get supplies. Our own DPW, there are certain items we're able to get that we had harder time getting earlier in the year. And then there's others that we still have to wait. I know in our hardening project, there's for the microgrid, we're still waiting for something to come, which I think it's supposed to come next month, so it all depends on the product and the demand.
Thank you, Ms. Marmion.
For 36-inch pipe, though, we should be okay, I would think. That's a fairly common size in pipe.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stark?
Yeah, I have a few questions. Well, first of all, a statement. That's the U.S. Producer Price Index for concrete pipe. This is a concrete pipe, not a steel pipe. And that's not coming down, unfortunately. That you might want to factor that into your thinking. Steel pipe is, but not by much. But what I noticed is if they did this estimate at the beginning of the year, the concrete pipe index isn't actually up that much in that time period. It's only up about 10, 15%. So it makes me wonder first whether their estimates were really stale on supplies. But then if you look at the cost breakdown, even if this pipe were 20% cheaper, it wouldn't make the project that much cheaper because the equipment is the most important component. And so it makes me wonder whether that is something where we might see some cost pressure subside. Are they renting equipment or are you paying depreciation on their equipment?
Again, it would be part of the contractor's bid to include whichever, whether they own the equipment, whether they lease the equipment, that's all up to them. Another aspect of this is this sanitary sewer line is located in an environmentally sensitive area. We had to get several permits from Army Corps of Engineers, Connecticut DEP, inland wetlands. There's also the environmental cap where there's unfortunately a couple of sections that we have to actually go into the cap and then basically re-sew the cap or re-overlay the cap. So that also adds to the costs. And unfortunately, it's a necessary evil.
You anticipated a question. So looking ahead as you do the rest of the East Trunk, is it possible that this will have overrun more than the other sections because they're not as environmentally sensitive?
We're hoping that for the other section, the one immediately down, we did at least 18. We did 24 borings for depth of rock and water, and we did 18 composition borings. And there were one or two that had a little bit of contamination, but not hazardous. If there's a difference, if you know what I mean. And so we have a consultant on board that will write the spec for that particular area, for that particular section, the two out of the, was it 18 composition things. In a nutshell, for that contamination, they were only estimating about, if I recall, about $40,000 or $50,000 for the other project in contamination. Obviously, we don't know for sure. But one of the big things is it was a residential neighborhood way back when there was the factories. There was a road already there. Without too much knowledge, because obviously we weren't around then, but you find that they would dump or contaminants in areas that were easy and accessible. I don't think they were going to go down 25 feet underneath a roadway for East Trunk, but we don't know.
Can I just add to his point? That particular area below 95 that would hook up to this Ash Creek pipe is about 17 to 25 feet deep. It is very deep in the road. What added to the cost was the cost of steel. Huge number because of the trenching they were going to do. And we asked them to go back and look at that to see if they, we actually asked about trenchless drilling, which doesn't seem feasible. But one of the big factors in the increase was the cost of steel.
Is it typical, I mean, probably all projects vary, but is it typical for equipment to cost 40% of a contract?
Can you repeat that?
Equipment is 1.3 out of 2.9 million of direct expenses here, right? So 40%. Is that normal? We're within a reasonable range?
Well, like they said before, they had a range of like 15 to 30% on this. And so in this one here, it would be, there's only 331 feet of pipe. So obviously, labor and equipment is going to be a major expense. 30% is typical, I think. 33%, about a third. So 40% isn't too unusual for this type of project. But I would defer to quote the experts on that.
When you go to bid, do you get a mix of fixed price and cost plus 10%, or do you insist on one or the other?
Right now, the consultant is doing it as a lump sum project.
Let me see. Two more questions, and then I'm done. These are quick ones. How old is the pipe, and when was the last time that there was a failure, an SSO, that you could attribute to it?
The pipe is approximately 75 years. Real quick math. It was 1947 is the age is when the pipe. We believe the pipe was installed. So you can subtract 2022 to 1947. As far as SSOs, I would probably, right off the top of my head, I would say in 2021 in September, the hurricane remnant of Ida caused an SSO. I'd imagine there was a storm in 2018 I know of, and then there were two others in 2020 or 2021 in the summer. So potentially there could be four of them. John Bodie is on the line, and I would like to see if he has any comments and can add to anything that we've talked about, and he might have some more knowledge on the SSO. John, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the SSOs. Any 2021 when we had the Ida, that was definitely one. I don't remember the year, but there was a September we had 7 inches of rain in 3 hours. If we have an especially wet spring and it just keeps piling up, it's a choke point. You got 36 going to 33, and it just backs it up, and it takes quite a while to alleviate. So I don't have specific dates, but I think you hit the 4 major ones right on the head.
It's fair to say that this pipe in particular, when it fails, it tends to cause Jennings Beach to shut down, doesn't it? Is there a direct relationship or no?
I without answering it rather quickly, I'd probably say not for Jennings Beach, but other parts might be. And as I said before, maybe Ash Creek, open space, or something like that is possible.
Are you set? All right, thank you. Mr. Stark. Mr. Testani?
Yeah, just one quick. Hey, Bill, just curious. How did you find out about the $750,000 grant, and are there other grants that could be out there that we could apply for that could be applied toward this or the other future two projects that are connected to this?
The $750,000 grant is a DEC, I believe it's a DECD grant that was, I think, issued in 2017. So we were really shocked that they were allowed us another, because we've had, as I said, I think at least three extensions on it. And they did grant us an extension for this one. The Connecticut Communities Challenge Grant is anywhere from $0 to up to $5 million at a 50% cost share, where we have applied for the East Trunk sewer line, the section that's immediately south of this. And that's the one that we should be getting an answer sometime in early December on whether we got that grant or not.
I'm sorry, did I hear you correct? So that can range between 0 to, I think you said 5 million?
Well, it's all up to the state to see how much we would get awarded. Correct.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay. Are we, one more. Okay. Mr. Walsh?
Joe, can you explain to me, what did Jared say about the bonding? Because the way you explained it, it would almost seem like we shouldn't do bonding if we're trying to control the town's bonding.
Well, I
He
wasn't.
he would make the logic there would be, then don't do bonding, then pay for it directly out of your account.
Mr. Walsh, I'd like to go through the chair to Mr. Bodie to answer that question. That came to me through Mr. Bodie.
All right, Mr. Bodie, my question is to you. What did Jared Schmidt say to you in regards to bonding? Everything that he said to you.
I don't remember the exact conversation, but I think there was, we wanted to limit, there's a limit to the town bonding total. And we wanted to keep that into check. We didn't want to throw everything into bonding. We didn't want to throw everything into fund balance. So there was an equitable split, not 50-50, but the 2 million and the 3.5 seemed to be a reasonable ask.
Okay, because it would make sense if he was trying to control bonding, that you do none of the bonding and just pay for it with cash out of your account.
I can just probably answer that. I believe the 2 million is included in the estimates that get us to, within our bonding limit, and there's cushion within our bonding limit as well. So I think, Mr. Schmidt mentioned this. I asked the same question offline, and asked, why we wouldn't take the whole amount out of fund balance. But I think there was a discomfort, lowering fund balance to that level, and there was capacity, comfortable capacity, within our bonding parameters to be able to bond the amount that we're bonding.
Okay. Joe, in regards to having your balance go so low by 2027, I think you said, correct? Be zero. So there'd be no money, so if some part of the system blew up one night out of some disaster, which has happened before. There's been some problems before that have been $1 million problems or more.
The digester.
Exactly.
Have one right now.
Why
yes.
wouldn't you try to keep like $3 million in your account like we've always done at a minimum, as Ms. Charlton kind of addressed? Because we were always told before, back to those days, that this was an emergency fund. This was here in case we woke up one day and something disastrous had occurred, and we needed to do something immediately. Why is it really your thought or the board's thought that you would bring that account down to zero by 2027?
Jim, I didn't, this is the planning side of our commission. I would never allow that to go to zero.
Okay.
But when we look at all the projects that are scheduled, all the projects that are tied to the town waterfall, sorry you didn't see it, but our numbers correspond to that waterfall. I just want to know in 2027 that we go negative, basically.
Okay.
It's 2022. We now need to do something, and we've started looking for more grants, which is the big numbers. We've got to start there. We've started looking at, we're talking about maybe bisecting our billing to commercial versus residential. We have 17,000 residents, 17,000 billings, and of those, 3,000 of them are just $150 minimum. So we have 13,000 people that are supporting by ratepayers. So we need to look for other sources. And this just allows us, it points to, between now and then, we need to react. We would never let it get to zero.
Okay, so as Ms. Charlton, our chairwoman, addressed her analysis on how it went from 3 million to 13 million over the last 10 years, was that planned by your board because you saw these projects coming up? Is that why you started increasing the fees?
We started increasing the fees, but actually, it's unfortunately a two-edged sword. The reason it started increasing from 2017 and beyond is we stopped doing projects. We stopped paying for projects. And that caused the fund balance to go up.
Okay. Because kind of what I'm hearing from you is that all this building that has been going on in the town is causing a lot of these problems with needing larger trunk lines and more capacity. I'm hearing about one other one that you did that started off at 3 million, now is 8 million gallons. Was that a day when that was quoted? Was that dollars or was that gallons? I wasn't sure what you were talking about.
You mean the calculation when we reject a project because it wasn't, I was talking about 80% if the
No, it
pipe
wasn't
gets to
that.
above
It was,
80%.
maybe I misunderstood what you were saying. I thought you were talking about the capacity of a line that's already been done and what capacity you planned it for. No? Okay. Regardless.
Apologize, I don't think,
Okay.
I don't think I mentioned gallons.
Okay. Well, I will say that I agree with Mr. Curley. I think we have half the information. I think we need a lot more information. I don't understand your business, and that's a bad place to be when you're going to be coming to us with projects over the next 10 years that total up to probably $100 million, if not more dollars. And I think we need to, I'm going to make a motion that we postpone this to a date I'll let the chairwoman choose in January and get a full proposal and a night just on WPCA projects, where we are, where we're going, how we think we're going to pay for them. Because this is a large number, and we keep being surprised at every level they come before us. Every level. Like even learning about some of these other future projects. We don't even have waterfall on them. And the numbers we have, each time they're 200% over what we thought they were going to be.
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
And
I'd like to second that, Madam Chair.
And I also think that I would like at that meeting for this company to come before us, D&B engineers and architects, for us to ask them questions on how they do estimating and how this price went in 4 months or 5 months up by 200%. Whether it's a page, whether it's 1,000 pages, to quote Mr. DeWitt. I mean, it's an estimate is an estimate, and you're supposed to give us your professional opinion on that number. And if you're half-assing it, we need to know that.
Okay, thank you. So we have a second on the motion. I just want to make one comment, and maybe, and I don't know if Mr. Bodie or Mr. Hurley wants to weigh in on this. I have one concern. I asked Mr. Schmidt about the timing of getting this presentation. Didn't sound like January was going to happen. He said it would be several months. We're going to be going into budget season. So my concern is if we delay this, we're not going to have the whole presentation that we want in January. And if we delay it again, this project could be delayed more significantly than 2 months. And then there's some consequences to that. So I wish that Mr. Schmidt was here, but I did ask him specifically because I was trying to figure out agenda items for the next couple months. He didn't give me confidence that we would be. He initially offered up after the budget season, so April. That's kind of late. So now we're talking about a 6-month delay. And, you know, obviously it's up to the board, but that causes me some concern in terms of, you know, the issues Ms. Marmion raised. I'm not sure what we're buying ourselves. I wholeheartedly agree, and I will tell you, I've had this conversation with Mr. Schmidt more than once on the need to have a full analysis, just given the number of projects that are coming up, given the questions, you know, around the revenue and all of those things. So I wholeheartedly agree. I personally am not, you know, this isn't your motion, I understand that. I personally would be uncomfortable delaying this for 6 months. And I think if we delay it 2 months, I'm not sure we're going to have what we need, especially given the holidays in front of us. So I would just ask the board to think about that and think about, you know, if we vote to delay this for 2 months, we may come back in January and postpone again to another date certain after the budget. So, Mr. Curley?
Yeah, just during the comment to the motion, I tend to agree with you that we need more information, Jim. I do agree with you, but I do understand and appreciate the concern about an extended delay beyond January. I guess I think about what Mr. Flynn mentioned in the Board of Selectmen meeting, where he said, okay, for the second and third phase, we need all this information. We'll move forward with this one, but for the next one, and Mr. DeWitt, I appreciate your comment about how the next one never seems to happen, so we would have to stick to our guns with that. But I do agree that delaying by 6 months doesn't sound like a good idea.
In my experience, the quickest way to get the answer and get the information you need is to say no. Because the administration and the WPCA is trying to get us to go to a yes. So going to a vote now, we'll figure it out later. Figuring out later is the Board of Finance where we got to vote on the next project. That's later. And then there's going to be some emergency then on why we got to do it. So maybe February would be a good time. Might not be for the administration. I don't know. I know they're going to be in the budget season and Board of Selectmen meeting on the budget and things like that. However, I think that engineering, WPCA, we just need a lot of information on this entire project. And it's not specifically those departments. They've done their budget. Their budgets are about to be approved. So that's not slowing up anything. So I don't have enough information to vote on some project that just went up by 200% in 4 months. I just don't. So that puts me in the odd position of having to vote against something that might be the best thing to do for the town. But I'm not going to waste the taxpayers' money and vote for 200% over the number without having all of my questions answered. That's just not going to happen for me, personally. It's just not the way we've done business, and we've got to figure it out. But
All right.
if I'm telling everybody, my own personal opinion is, if we're not going to postpone, which everyone's got to vote how they want to, I'm a no on this matter.
And I just want to say, Mr. Walsh, I appreciate your comments because I was here 6 or 7 months ago saying the same thing when we were approving projects in May. And, you know, I felt that we had building projects without adequate information, and we got told, do it now because there's health and safety issues and ADA issues, and you must do it immediately. And you know, I understand that. We should not be asked to do that. Where I see it, I'll just, and again, it's up to the board. Where I see this a little differently is I don't know what a couple months is going to buy me on this particular project. I think what we're going to gain in a couple of months is the broader picture on the entire waterfall and the financial plan and the revenue sources. This will be part of it. But I don't think we're going to, unless Mr. Hurley tells me different, I don't think we're going to have a different estimate in 2 months. We may put a grant in jeopardy. We may cause some other issues. But I think this individual project is going to be part of that thing that we look at in the future. I guess, let me just, I'm not sure if Mr. Bodie weighed in on this, but Mr. Bodie, has Mr. Schmidt spoken to you about putting together a full plan for the board's review? Because I just want, before we vote, I do want the board to have a realistic sense of the timing and not to believe that we're going to be here in January with the ability to review something if that's just not going to happen. So has he even talked to you about this?
We have talked, we have discussed it. We've had a preliminary meeting. Are we going to have something in January? I can't say for sure.
What does that mean? It's possible or no way?
Sure, it's possible.
Anything's possible, but
Okay, well,
I can't speak for Jared. I can't.
okay. So if it's possible, then I think maybe that gets to Mr. Walsh's point. So, Mr. Mottola?
Someone explain to me what's so hard about having possibly a special meeting in January to go over this? Is it, you shouldn't, I'm assuming the WPCA knows what it wants to do over the next 10, 15 years, right? You have it all right there. So,
John needs to use the microphone, please.
oh, I am, I thought. Here's what I said. I'll repeat myself. I said, what is so I know we're coming up on the budget season, but what's so difficult about having a special meeting at some point in January just on the WPCA topics and issues? The WPCA knows what it needs to do and wants to do over the next 10, 15 years, or more than that, right? Right, Joe? Little, 5 years.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. We already do know that we
Right.
have, what is that, about 8, 16, 20, there's like 24, 28 projects already
Right.
on here in the next 5-year window. We have our best guess or estimate on the pricing based on if they have a consultant engineer. If we don't have a consultant engineer, we only have the latest price, or maybe we get it from the DOT or from another nearby municipality that did something similar recently. And that's all that we have to go by.
Yep.
One of the things about the fund balance, and it was mentioned, is there's very minimal grants in here. So obviously, like we were talking about, if we happen to get $1 million or $2 million or whatever or $3 million, whatever it is going to be for the East Trunk Line, well, then that will obviously help the fund balance because we'll incorporate that grant into that. So we just don't know because it's an unknown in terms of what we can get. What I could tell you is that I have met with Jared, Joe, and John, and one or two people from finance as well, going over this. It was, in a way, reaction to Mr. Flynn's comments. So this wasn't a surprise that we knew eventually the boards would want to see a waterfall. I believe they're on the waterfall chart. I don't know if everything is. I know some of the items have been on it. As I said, it's a different department, so I don't know. I can't speak for that.
Mr. Hurley, and I don't want to interrupt
sure.
you. I think maybe part of the confusion here is, I don't think we're just looking for a waterfall. I think the plan was, the waterfall's a part of it, because those are your future capital requirements. But it was also the whole question around the fund balance. How, what are the sources of the revenue? We can't tell that from the budget book. How much specifically has it been building up? How much revenue has been contributed precisely by these other fees? How is that flowing into fund balance? Those things. And the other part of this that I know that's been discussed and there's been some concerns about were raised because of the digester issue. Are there other maintenance issues? Like, where does that stand? How did that thing catch us by surprise? And, what does all that look like? So I think that what was envisioned was more than a waterfall, because I understand you have your waterfall. And so if we think January is feasible, I'm getting the feeling that the board would like to defer to January. But if this is, not something, and it's Thanksgiving, it's going to be December in a minute. We've got the Christmas holidays. January's not that far off. So if you guys can get it done, I think that's what people are asking for.
That's it.
Okay, but I'd like to, I just want everybody to be clear if that's, if we're doing something that's going to end up pushing this project off beyond the budget season, because I do think I'd feel differently about it in that case.
If I can make a clarification, I'm so used to calling the capital budget the waterfall, but on this one here, Joe and maybe some other ones from the WPCA, he does have a chart here where it's projected cost, potential grant, bond, maybe bond servicing, and some of the expenditures and what's left in the fund balance, and the revenue. Again, the ones for this year are pretty accurate, I would think, but the ones in the future are, estimates. But he does have 5 or 6 different columns, all the projects that were done for each year. So
This
I'll let
would
Joe
be,
go.
this would be the basis for the meeting you want to have.
Yeah, and like, is
And-
the
and we-
200% increase put on all these future projects? Because
Right.
that's almost got to be the starting point now.
Yeah, this doesn't, this has tied into Jared's town waterfall. We are in sync. He sent me his waterfall numbers, so our projects, at least from a starting point, capital-wise, are in sync with his numbers. Then we continue on with whether we're going to bond it, We take away the grant money, what we're going to bond, what we're going to pay for directly. So I think this would be the basis of what you're looking for.
Okay, so it sounds like January may be feasible. I want to apologize to Mr. DeWitt, since he's sitting behind me. I never see when he's got his hand up, but Mr. DeWitt, you had a question?
No, more of a comment. I'm just agreeing with Mr. Walsh. I'm a no vote on this unless we defer the meeting. And with all due respect to our chairperson, it is not our job to talk about timing. I could care less about timing. Our job and what we're voted in this role to do is the financial aspect. And again, I don't think I have what I'm going to need. In January, am I going to have everything? I certainly don't expect to have a new estimate from Mr. Hurley that says this is now $3.5 million. I don't expect that. But I at least expect a waterfall. So anything we get better in January will be okay. I would appreciate. But again, just to agree with Mr. Walsh, I'm a no vote unless this moves to January or whenever you think the date certain is, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Mr. Curley?
Yeah, and thank you, Madam Chair. And with all due respect, I have a timeline question, Chris. But I just want to make sure we're all operating with all whatever information we have available tonight. And I just want to understand, if we were to approve tonight, obviously the RTM has to approve too, then you have to go out and get bids. What was or is your timeline for breaking ground and completing the project? And if this does get delayed to January, is it simply a 2-month push on the timeline, or does that change more than that?
It'd probably be a 2-month push. This type of project could start in late January or February on some of the preparation that would have to be done. If we pushed it a month or two, it just pushes everything else down. The idea of January, and again, I can't speak for Jared, I can't speak for John or anyone else, to get you at least what we'd call a draft of not just the waterfall, but, some revenue and bonding, that could be done. I think it's almost done already, at least in a draft form.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Mr. Early. My question was, if we were to approve tonight, what is the timeline of the project? When would you break ground? When would the project be complete?
We'd put, probably early February, late January or early February.
And then 13 to 16 months, right?
Yeah.
So if you delay it a month, it'll be March. You'll start.
Right, again, 1 or 2 months probably won't matter. More than that would, well, from January, we'll also know if we get the grant from the other project as well. Obviously, we'd prefer to have it passed tonight, but the one, if it's, January or early January, we can get some more information from D&B, as was suggested. We could get you at least a preliminary or a draft of, I'm trying to think of what do we want to call it. I know, I was going to say, let's not call it a waterfall. It would be, I guess, a fund balance sheet with a list of projects. We'll call it that. And we'll try to get you more information. I mean, that's all we can do, and you go from there.
Is the grant is not at risk if we postpone the $750,000 grant?
Postponing it, say, 6 weeks, I don't think would jeopardize that if we went, but, again, postponing it 6 weeks is not going to, unless something drastically
Okay.
changes, I don't think it's going to
Thank you.
change the costs.
Thank you.
We'll follow up, make sure that it isn't in jeopardy.
I think we need to
This
vote.
is Jared.
Jared, welcome. Sorry you
Lazarus was raised from the dead.
had to call in. Hope you're feeling okay.
I've been better. What questions can I answer? I was away and my phone started blowing up. Are there some questions that, I don't know, maybe can give some people some comfort in voting for this?
So the concern here is the lack of the overall financial plan for the WPCA. The concern is the 200% increase in the cost estimates since we first heard about this project a few months ago, and what that means in terms of other WPCA projects going forward. And the desire is to see the plan that you and I had spoken about, and understand the WPCA's entire business and capital outlook and, revenue plans, et cetera, more holistically. So the motion that is on the table right now would be to postpone this item for 2 months and give time for you and Bill and others to collect all the information. The concern was whether it could be, if we, decided to delay till January, to make sure that we would have that information in January and that we could go, be confident that we could go forward with a decision at that time. So that's kind of where we are. And I think a couple of board members have indicated that they simply don't feel like they have the whole picture in front of them, so they will vote no this evening unless we delay. So that's where we are.
I'll say, with regard to the issue of the estimate for the project, I don't know why the original one was so low. This one is where it is now. I think the idea of having a company come in to explain themselves is a bad idea. If we start hauling companies in here to give explanations, I think it's going to have a chilling effect on companies bidding in Fairfield at a time when there aren't a lot of companies out there, because there are a lot of cities and towns that are looking for vendors, and so I don't think that's going to help the situation at all. You and I spoke earlier today, I believe it was, maybe it was yesterday, about a plan for WPCA. My conception of a plan was to look at everything and look at their 5 to 10 years and go to, and I think I mentioned this to you, but have an aggressive strategy for getting grants. We as Bill Hurley has mentioned a number of times, we have one that we have our fingers crossed that is going to come through for us. But in order to be able to satisfy all the needs of the WPCA, there has to be a major undertaking, not just of raising their rates, but it's got to be multiple prongs, including rates, including maybe some special assessments, including getting grants, looking at using the Clean Water Fund bonds, which we could possibly get at a lower rate. So there's a lot of facets to it. So when we talked about multiple months to come up with a plan, that's what I had in mind. If there's something else that the board wants, just sort of an explanation of where the WPCA is, what they do, and kind of a nuts and bolts type of explanation, we can certainly do that quicker. I just think that their needs are great. And one of the things that why this process, with this capital planning process takes longer, and I think longer than it has in the past, is we're addressing a ton more needs than have ever been addressed in this town. And we're doing that because they haven't been addressed, because they haven't even been brought to light. They hadn't been brought to light, and we're dealing with a lot of those issues now. And so it's taking us longer to get through the process. And like we said from the beginning, and the first select woman has said, by having different people in there from from the different boards, we hoped would help the process in the end, even though, at this point in time, there might be some frustration with, not having a full capital plan. That's a timing issue. We happen to be coming to you now with a project. And so that's an unfortunate situation. As far as, what were some of the other things?
But, Jared, if you could you touched on this, but I think the board would appreciate hearing this. One of the things you had discussed with me, getting back to the grants, was that part of the strategy to be able to capture significant grants would be to have the whole plan put together rather than, getting piecemeal things. So we would have a comprehensive plan, and then we could have a strategy to go after more significant grant dollars, whatever that might entail. Can you just maybe talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So we started working and working really using our new grant coordinator. She's not that new anymore. She's been there over a year now. But she's been a huge, huge asset to our department and to the town, and not just in helping us in the process of trying to secure more grants, but also with compliance and identifying gaps in that way. So, but she is delving into what the different pots of money are that the state has. There's constantly talk about a 20% grant through the Clean Water Fund, and where we stand on that priority list, and we're way far down and probably couldn't get money. But in the process of researching this, we're discovering that there are other pots of money as well. And so we really want to, using some of the documents that have been used in the past, including the analysis of the facility itself, the WPCA facility itself, analysis of the pump stations. Some of these things are a few years old, but we're trying to bring all of that information together to paint a picture for really the state in this case, to talk about the needs of the WPCA that have been ignored for so long. And so we want to be able to tell that story. And so it's talking about the population, and even when you look at the plan, the analysis that was put together for the facility, there were some predictions in there about where the population would be at this time. And so, they were saying 58,000, 59,000. We've obviously eclipsed that already. And they were trying to predict where the population growth would be. And they predicted it would be in the, some of the rural and suburban areas. That's not happening. It's happening in already densely populated areas. And so, that's where and this project is one of those areas where they're going to definitely need that help. So we're looking at those documents to, and looking at the demographics, looking at the age of the infrastructure, the age of the facility itself, and to, like I said, to put together a plan for overall and long-term how we fund the needs of the WPCA.
Okay, thank you. I just want to remind everyone, we still have the motion on the table to postpone. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Schmidt that would be helpful to them in voting on that motion? Or should we bring that to a vote? Mr. Hurley?
I just want to highlight one more time that if you go to the estimate from the engineer on page 5, The labor, material, and equipment, and then they have an other, ends up being 2.9 million. So you could say 2.4 to 2.9 or 2 point isn't too bad. Then they have 20% for general conditions, 5% for overtime, 5% for small tools calculated on labor. They got sales tax in here, which is 114,000. Material cost bidding contingency, 10%. The escalation, 3.73%. Contractor overhead, 10%. Design contingency, 5%. Bonds and insurance, 5%. And then at the end, when it comes to 5.2, they say bid, form, allowance, and unit price is another 5%. So they have really added. Again, we don't know until we go out to bid what the exact amount will be, but that's where they came up with the number. Even the $700,000 inspection, we were probably figuring somewhere around 400,000 or 500,000, and that was even higher than what we thought as well. So I just wanted to highlight that again. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Testani?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. The only question I would have for Jared is, since we're talking about postponing, would he be willing to work, or can he work with Mr. Hurley and, whoever else to make sure we have the information that we've been talking about that's going to help us in January to figure out what direction we want to take on this project and the two corresponding projects that go with it. So I know we're talking about January, and Madam Chair, you alluded to that's coming quickly, so I just want to get some
Right. So,
reassurance, for lack of a better
Jared,
word.
will you be able to provide the board the plan in January? Or if we postpone till January, are we going to end up postponing again if we're waiting for a plan?
I mean, I can provide a plan that gets us through the next year or 18 months. We can do that in January and give a sense of where things are. But if you're looking for a long-term plan, which like you and I talked about, that's going to take longer.
Mr. Walsh, you had a question? I'm sorry, Mr. Testani, were you done?
Sorry, Jim. I just want to clarify, the plan we're looking for, we want to get an idea, and you alluded to it as well, Madam Chair, on revenue, on where the WPCA is now, what's going to happen with this. So I don't
Longer
think we're
term,
necessarily, yeah, exactly. That's going to help us in the decision process with this project and, like I said, the other two corresponding ones.
Yeah, we could definitely provide that.
Mr. Schmidt, this is Jim Walsh. I think some of the frustration is, and I said this to Mr. Devanchik and Mr. Hurley, is that we have like $100 and something million worth of projects from the WPCA that are going to be coming down over the next 7 years, 8 years. And we have no idea until we heard some of them tonight what some of this stuff is. We have no idea what's going on with WPCA. And that's a horrible place to be, sitting here on the Board of Finance, not knowing any of this information, not knowing how the revenue is going to come out. I'm hearing that you made the decision about 50% of this being, or $2 million of it being bonded because we don't have a lot of bonding capacity left. Not a lot of bonding capacity left. We got $100 million worth of projects coming up. Like, where's all this coming from? Like, we're not understanding it. We don't have a waterfall. The numbers that we do have in a waterfall, or the budgets that Mr. Devanchik has and maybe even Mr. Hurley have, are they increased by 200% now? I guess they should be. All those numbers should be increased by 200%. Because we're wrong. And what does that do to the number? And we're just kind of frustrated on, like, what are we voting on and where's this going? Joe was really nice in explaining that his surplus, based on where they're going, if nothing is added to it, would be spent down to zero by 2027. I'm not sure whether that includes the 200% increase in projects, because that's where the project costs go. Okay. But obviously we got to keep $3 million. You guys are going to have to tell me a reasonable amount if something blows up one night. something completely unexpected in that fund. So these are some of the questions we're having and we're not understanding. And I think an overview of this entire, where this WPCA, this whole area is going, because we're going, it used to be like we'd have a trunk line issue and we'd deal with that and not have to deal with it for 10 or 12 years, something like that. Now it's like trunk line after trunk line after trunk line after trunk line, like a train coming through over the next 4 to 5 years. Something I don't think I ever saw coming, but maybe it had been presented and been in some waterfall from 4 or 5 years ago. So that's what I think we need to get a handle on. I will tell you, I heard your words about this initial estimate that's now gone up by 200%, and you're afraid of having them come before us because that might prevent others from coming before us. But how does the administration have faith in this company that 4 or 5 months ago told us a number? You're like, you don't understand how they got to that number. Well, has anybody asked them? Has anybody asked them how it's gone up by 200%? Because how do you have faith in somebody? If I went in to buy a Honda Accord in April and it was $40,000, and then I went in there tomorrow and they told me it was $120,000, I think I'd have to, want to know why. So it's just, these are some of the, I'd like to hear it. That's why I said I'd like to hear from them. But how do we then have faith in going forward with them if they can't even put together a number that's, and they knew inflation was going up. Inflation's not new. These are some of the questions we have that we need to get answered.
I can't answer all those. Because I just can't. I share your frustration with the WPCA and analyzing what's happening there, which is why I laid out talked about what I talked about before, and trying to come up with a long-term plan and a better understanding of what's happening there. So I share your frustration there. You and the chairwoman have access to the proposed waterfall. Whether you trust it or not, or whether you trust the numbers that are in there, those are the numbers that we have at the time, like anything else, and that's what we're working with. And those, they have been public meetings since the second meeting, so anybody else who wants access to it can get access to that as well. They can see it. It's it's not being hidden from anybody. So, and I think we updated every meeting. So,
Jared, I do have to jump in on that. That waterfall is in process. We haven't even discussed the Board of Ed on that waterfall, where we have a whole, additional set of challenges in front of us in terms of capital requirements. So there is not a waterfall that's complete at the moment. From my perspective, we are working on it, but
with all due respect, there isn't one. At this point in time, there hasn't been one in the past either. At this point, there's always a capital planning workshop that happens in January, so it's not complete. It wouldn't be complete at this point in time.
well, it was supposed to be in September, but I don't see any point in debating this. It was supposed to be in September. We changed the process, and now it's going to be in January. But my point is that it's in process, and there is, even for Mr. Walsh and I, the full picture is not there because, we haven't even gone through all of the departments in the town or the Board of Ed. So I think it's time to vote on the amendment or the motion to postpone, because we really, I think I'm hearing everybody, and we need to move on in the meeting. So if it's okay with everyone, are we ready to vote on this item? Okay. So let's see, the date certain we don't have, so here's the challenge. We don't have a schedule because we're going to vote on our schedule for next year at our organizational meeting next month. So as far as a date certain, I can throw out a date, which I've preliminarily looked at dates, and I can certainly suggest a date, which would be Tuesday, January 10th, which is sort of the normal timing of our January meeting. Unless, Mr. Walsh, you have another suggestion.
I guess the question is should we just choose a special meeting? Because
Okay.
I think this is just, there's going to be questions, and, you know, I'm expecting a presentation of some sort, and
Okay.
just to make it easy for all of us, maybe, and to give them slightly, a little bit more time, maybe make it later in January.
Okay.
And just have a special meeting on this topic.
All right, so do you want to revise your motion then?
Yes.
Okay.
So, but taking that into account, is there a date in late January that would work with the chairwoman's schedule, or are you're not going to conflict with anything? Obviously, there's,
I mean, since we typically meet on Tuesdays, this board, as I look at the calendar, the Tuesdays later in January would leave us with either the 24th or the 31st.
I'd like to do it on the 31st to give them as much time as they might need, 'cause with holidays coming up and things like that, you know. So I would prefer that, my motion be that this matter be adjourned to a date certain, that being January 31st of 2023.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor of the motion to postpone this item to January 31st? Let's say aye.
Aye.
All right, it is, are we missing someone? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? Okay, it is unanimous. All right, so this item is postponed. All right, sorry, Bill.
One question, though, because it always occurs to us, too, especially on projects that fluctuate a lot, is the other idea is we could put the thing out to bid, and then you get people to bid on the project, contractors, and then we come back to the boards that way. But the problem is, if it gets turned down, like Jared was saying before, word of mouth will spread. And if we were to do it that way, and you know, it takes a lot of time and effort to put together a bid package, and also for the contractors to bid on that. But if we turned it down some reason, then all of a sudden word gets out. So we always have to do this game of trying to guesstimate or estimate how much money it's going to be. And the only way we have it is through the engineer's estimates. And we've had 3 different engineers come up with different, you know, for pricing for 3 different projects. And for whatever reason, they all were underneath. This one we don't know yet because obviously it hasn't gone out to bid. So I just wanted to mention that it'd be easier to go the other way, but there's repercussions from that too.
I don't think you can. That's without getting into a big discussion.
Mr. Curley?
Yeah, logistically, I understand your point, and it would work if we had firm numbers, right? But the reality is, I don't think you'll get credible bids if contractors don't know that there is funding for the project. So we have to do it this way.
That's what I thought. I never heard it publicly or whatever, so thank you for explaining that. I'm in total agreement, by the way, so thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. And if there, you know, I won't speak for anyone else, but maybe I might. If there's any questions about what the expectations of this plan are, you know, please reach out. Be happy to chat offline so that, you know, once we're here together, we're not saying, you know, what about X, Y, or Z, and we're all, you know, confident that we have in front of us what we need.
We need another 2 months.
What's that?
And we need another 2 months now.
All right.
Thank
Believe
you.
me,
Thank you again.
We'll try to get it as soon as possible.
All right.
Certainly. We don't want to delay it. Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Courtney, are you still awake? Okay. Okay, so I'm also, I'd like to take a motion. So item 4 on the agenda was related to item 3, and that was to hear, consider, and act on a supplemental resolution. And that resolution was basically just to authorize the bonds to be repaid from the WPCA to the town. So does someone want to make a motion to also postpone that item? Mr. Mottola, seconded by Mr. Testani. All in favor of postponing item 4 to January 31st? Aye. Okay, it is unanimous.
Mr. Stark has left the room.
Oh, it is not unanimous. It is 8-0-1. 8-0. Okay, fine. All right. Actually, before we move on, I did have a question on the bond resolution. Can I just ask Mr. Sastrom while he's here?
He's here.
You're here. May as well take advantage of you since we're here. My question was...
Maybe we get some advice after 2 hours.
Wait, the question that I was going to ask if we were going to vote on this resolution was the language, typically, so this resolution assumes that we are going to transfer money from the WPCA fund balance. And typically when we do that, we vote on those transfers separately. And so this resolution, the transfer from fund balance is not actually in the resolution. It's only in the whereas language. And is that okay, I guess?
Yes, it is. I think the resolution contemplates more than a transfer from the fund balance. The resolution contemplates a memorandum of understanding between the towns, in effect the town's general fund, and the WPCA as an enterprise fund, where the WPCA agrees that for the amortization period of the bonds, in this case it would be 20 years, they would budget into the WPCA's budget every year enough to pay the debt service back to the town. So it's really not a transfer of fund balance.
No, but I guess I'm referring to the 3.5 million of fund balance actual transfer that would be used to fund a portion of this in addition to the bonding. And I guess I was questioning whether we should be voting on that as a separate item, since we typically do require a vote on fund balance transfers, and that aspect of it was not in the resolution. We can, it's fine. I don't want to take up more time, but just, that was my question, so.
Yeah, I can take that offline with Jared. I don't believe we've actually run into that before, where we've had the, I think the WPCA board can vote to transfer its funds balance. I'm not sure that the Board of Finance ever needed to act on that, but I'm certainly willing to take it up with Jared before the January meeting and come back to you with a definitive answer.
Okay, yeah, typically we do vote on it, so I think we might have to either vote separately or build that vote into the resolution. So thank you for that, and thanks for hanging this whole time. All right.
We'll track that down.
Okay, great.
Happy Thanksgiving, all.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, John.
All right, so we are going to move on, thankfully, to item 5 to review the BOE financial position. I want to note there's an error in the wording on the agenda. It references financial position as of year end, and we're obviously here to review Q1, so September 30th and not June 30th. Can I have a motion to hear this item? Mr. Walsh, seconded by Mr. Mottola. For the public, the materials for this item begin on page 28 of the posted backup online. So welcome, Ms. Courtney Laborious, who's the Executive Director of Finance and Business Services for Fairfield Public Schools. And I also want to welcome Mr. Jeff Peterson and Ms. Christine Vitale from the Board of Education. Oh. And Mr. Testani, who's joining remotely. So thank you all for being here, and whoever wants to kick it off, please do.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you tonight about our first quarter financial results. The Board of Education, as of the first quarter, is projecting a surplus balance of $2.6 million. That's mainly attributable to two large factors, one being greater than a budgeted attrition and vacancies in personnel, and the second, and the resulting savings as well in insurances, as well as savings in transportation due to a bus driver shortage. Those are the big drivers of the projected surplus as of now. Overall, on the bus, well, since we had questions about the bus situation in the last, when we were presenting the year-end results, Mr. Peterson did invite the Director of Transportation to speak with the Finance Committee about that. So I just wanted to give you a broad introduction and then invite Mr. Peterson to speak specifically to that point. In this projection, you'll see an estimated $543,000 projected balance surplus in transportation. If we were to run our buses as we're running them right now, it would be about an $844,000 surplus, because the way that our contract is structured is such that we only pay for the buses that we run. But our transportation director has credibly negotiated a contract where we are able to also add tiers to the buses, meaning we keep our drivers on the road longer. So we were budgeted for 119 buses with 169 runs, which the run equals, a run of kids home to school. And we're currently running 102 buses with 162 runs overall. That means that we're stretched thin. We're making things work to the best of our ability due to the testament of our drivers and our Director of Transportation and his staff. And he did come to speak to us about the challenges that we're seeing with our families and kids, and in spite of the fact that we're making these efforts, that I wanted to invite Mr. Peterson to speak to.
Well, I wouldn't have much to add to that broad overview, except to say that as of our last update, we were also looking at potentially certifying some new drivers. Currently, I believe he said that we had 110 listed drivers, which is well below our normal capacity, and that 5 we were at that point in time when we spoke earlier this month were awaiting certification. So that would give us some additional flexibility in case of just driving me out for illness or some such thing. So that additional capacity is something that we are certainly happy to look forward to. And
yeah, and they do, in this projection, as I said, it would be 844 if we ran our buses as we are now, but the projection estimates that we'll add 4 Tier 2 buses, which is our mid-tier bus, as well as 5, I believe. I'm sorry, no, 2 6-hour buses, which run for special ed transportation. We have a new manager with First Student, and she's really hit the ground running with ensuring that the recruitment efforts are like sort of above and beyond what I think we've done before. She's going to other towns. She's going to a lot of events for recruiting, like fairs and things like that. She's also looking at the training structure and really advocating for, she came from a different county, so she's looking at Fairfield DMV and how we do certifications and really proactively working with the DMV to get us the drivers. So we're confident we'll be able to at least add those buses. We're seeing the same shortages that they're seeing throughout the state. That's transportation. Yes, I'm so sorry.
Can you just point us to where that transportation number is on the schedule? Because I don't see anything of that size in the projected balance column.
Sure. I'm so sorry. I jumped way ahead. First, we have a narrative in the front. I'm going to just flip to page 3 of my presentation, which is a bigger page in your packet, but it's page 3. So it starts, its header is fiscal 22-23 by major classifications, and it's in parens. It says summary. So you'll see the personnel services. I'll speak to that in a moment. Fixed charges. Pupil personnel. When I get to the detail, within that pupil personnel number is transportation and pupil personnel. So if you flip to the next page and you go down to line 17, that's where you start to see a large part of the surplus for transportation. So the bus aids, we're seeing 121,000 balance, as well as in the special ed transportation contracts, which includes First Student, but a few of our other contractors, 421,000. And then if you flip to the next page, In addition to that, you'll see in maintenance, operations, and transportation, there's another line for pupil transportation, 38, 39, and 40. We also summarize it on the following page, so you can just see the overall transportation of $542K in sped and just about $3,000 in general education, because we're running those tiers, as I mentioned before, greater, even though the buses are lower.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So just to take a step.
Madam Chairwoman, should we ask questions as we go along, or does she want them to be held to the end?
Yeah, so before you move off of transportation, are you done with transportation?
Sure, and I can take questions on that.
Sure. Okay. Mr. Walsh?
Thank you. Thank you for the information. So with this savings, obviously comes issues for the students, correct? And what are those issues?
Yes.
Longer bus lines, I mean, waits, for getting from house to school.
So the transportation director did say that we are running longer runs this year, but about 10 minutes longer for some routes. And trying to keep that as low as possible, trying to be creative with drawing the routes, which is something that we do in-house, but it is a strain.
The end of the day is the most challenging, so they are getting all the kids to school on time, for the most part. But the end of the day, we're really stretched thin, because that's where everything accumulates. So, we start with the high school, the middle school, and then by the time we get to the elementary schools, if there's backups, it causes delays, and kids are getting home much later than they should or would have normally if we had all our buses.
So the plan is still to try to hire more bus drivers, as many as we can, to get up to what was budgeted?
Correct. We realistically think that we can bring on 5 more drivers plus 2, so 7 more drivers for a total of 7 more buses. And that was projected to happen in December 1st. So as I last spoke with the transportation director about a week ago, the STA manager, first student manager, about a week ago. I used to be with a district that used STA, so I apologize to my first student colleagues. But she was confident that we'd be able to get those buses in place.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mr. Testani?
Yes, sorry, I just had a quick question on the transportation piece, since we're on that. But on page 4, since you mentioned, and this is just specific to the transportation, under the sped expense, I'm a little confused, because it's showing a pretty significant deficit. But then later on, it's showing.
Yeah,
Can you
it's
help us to understand that?
Thank you for asking that. It's a little bit confusing the way we've historically categorized it, so I was also confused. But pupil personnel expenses are some of what we're calling here line 16 special ed expenses, and then all of the transportation. It's a legacy of the way that the board had asked us to report on it before. I'm working to refine this a little bit, because that's what we do report for our excess costs, for example, related to special education services. The negative is not actually a negative, which is going to sound odd, but I'll explain why. That negative 430K is the function of, when I get to talk to about the personnel, we're having challenges filling positions, specifically in our paraeducator positions. And as a result, we spoke with the board and got the approval to transfer $689,000 from the personnel surplus to the special ed contract services, which is contained in that sped line. So because this is a point in time, September 30th, that transfer hadn't happened yet. So to be true to the report, it's showing that negative balance because it was included in the projection. We knew we were going to contract for that, right? And so you'll see in the Q2, all things being equal, that will turn into a plus 200,000, and you'll see the surplus in personnel go down by the equal 700,000.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if I may also, 2.6 million at this point in the year, and I'm just anticipating the question. One of the things that I think Mr. Testani asked me to do, and we've worked with the board to do, is get accurate or as accurate projections as early as we can in the year and not wait to say we're going to see how things shake out and then come to the Board of Ed for a request for transfers at year end. We're doing that in real time so that we can solve the problems that we have. So one of the big problems is paraeducator shortages that we're seeing in spite of our efforts of our HR director to assertively recruit the individuals that we need. So as a result, our director of special ed identified some contract opportunities. We work with the town to get those contracts in place, as well as worked with the unions to allow us to have a temporary solution to bring some behavioral therapists, is that the title? BTs in, some behavioral therapists in lieu of the paras. It's performing those functions from a contract perspective. So we're addressing that issue in real time and reflecting it in the budget.
So basically, that adjustment is really just transferring the money for paras from, sort of permanent personnel or salaries down to contracted salaries. But the transfer hasn't happened yet as of September. So we're seeing
Correct.
the negative there at the moment. Okay.
Yeah.
And then so you have a flip between the line items, but I'm going to guess that the contracted personnel are more expensive?
They are, yeah, and we only transferred what we needed, so it wasn't a one-to-one transfer. The contracted, on average, they're costing us about $65,000, and all in, I would say on average, our paraeducators are about $50,000, including the average benefits that we pay.
Yeah, I assume we're still actively looking for paras, and if we're successful,
Correct.
that will mitigate that. Okay.
We are, but for those contracted services, that is for the year. So we are, it's not if we find somebody that those contracted services will go away. So we committed to those staffing for the rest of the year. The paraprofessionals, while Human Resources is actively recruiting, we are finding that we are hiring somebody new, and then someone who has been with us is leaving. So this is something that we're keeping our eye on, trying to get creative for solutions for recruiting. It's not just paraprofessionals. I'm sure if you've read the newspapers, just in education, private and public, we're seeing really a mass exodus of people, either just leaving the profession, retiring early, and it goes everywhere from the bus drivers to paraprofessionals to our teachers. So, we really started this year in our budget last year. We were budgeting not for a pandemic and thinking that we wouldn't be still feeling the ramifications of it from a staffing perspective. We still know that there was the educational impact of the pandemic and the mental health and social emotional learning that we prepared for and are working through, but we're not expecting this level of challenges for staffing across the board.
Mr. Walsh, you have follow-up?
To follow up on your question, are you finding that most of the people are retiring, or are they going to other districts because they can get more money?
So we don't have a human resource here, so I don't want to misspeak on that. I know she has shared publicly in the past that as they do exit interviews we know from a fact that we doubled our retirees this year, and it was more than we would have anticipated based on normal trends. We were projecting 21. We adjusted the budget for additional number, and we ended up with 41 retirees for this year.
I think for the paraprofessionals, it's a combination of both. I think that some it's salary that we're just not competitive to many districts, many of our neighbors. I think that for some, the nature of the job is just, it's a difficult position. And, after the last few years, many are just choosing to either burnt out or tired or wanting to take a break, maybe regroup, or maybe go into, thankfully some going into becoming a teacher, which is good for the profession, but it's a combination of all those things. And we're going to be looking at it from many different lenses to see what we can do, really looking ahead to next year, because we really don't want to be in the position next year of having to hire outside contractors to provide special education, be a paraprofessional in essence. But we needed to take action this year because these paraprofessionals, the support for some of our students are included in their IEPs, so we have a legal obligation to provide the services. So I credit Mr. Mancusi and the board and the superintendent for just acting quickly to make sure that we hire the staffing and we're in compliance.
Ms. Laborious, I was reading some numbers on your report while you were answering our chairwoman's question. Do you say that the average we pay a paraprofessional is $50,000, but that includes the cost of benefits?
Yeah, we estimate, so the average, because we've got 10 levels in our contract right now, so yeah, the average is about 25,000, and our average benefit is about 25, including FICA and health insurances.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, and I just wanted to add too, just for the public edification, we are working with Mr. Mancusi. So when we run reports about the vacancies, we're incorporating those contracted staff. So when he's working to fill positions at the various schools, we're not doubling because we're aware of where everybody's located at any given point in time. You know, we're marrying the two reports, and also, and he's working directly with the principals on an ongoing basis centrally to ensure that we have all of our resources covered in a way that maximizes them.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, we sort of jumped into the middle of the page. So however you want to take it from here, be my guest. Mr. DeWitt, sorry. Thank you for speaking out because I can't see you.
Thank you. So let me understand. A $4 million increase in special education budget is yielding a loss of $436,000 projected at the end of the year. But we'll have another $689,000 just so we can basically be on budget. How is this possible?
I'm sorry.
I prayed that I wouldn't have to have this conversation every quarter.
I promise you're not going to have to.
I'm sure you guys did too. I'm a pain in the butt about it. But how can I not ask about it? $1 million.
SOS.
Time out. I'm so sorry because I want to be really clear because I think it's good for the public too that I say it in a way that's clear. So that's not a true gap in special education. It's a timing of the report. When you look at that line for special education, it's showing a projection which includes contracted staff that weren't budgeted. So we went out and contracted for BT, behavioral therapists that are acting in lieu of paraprofessionals. So the board authorized a budget transfer of $689,000 from personnel paraprofessional vacancy money to go to fund these contracted services that weren't in the initial budget. We didn't do that until we had the approval from the board, but this report is September 30th. So in the next report, you're going to see that be a positive, roughly $250,000. And it's only a matter of timing because we include the projection shows the services, but the budget doesn't yet. So it's not because it's.
I understand what you're doing, but you had a $4 million increase in special ed, and you're like, oh, we forgot, we need more people. So
Mr. DeWitt, if I can I think what Ms. Laborious is saying is the money for these paras was budgeted. It was just budgeted in a different line item. So we're not. Right. So we're not going over on our SPED budget here because the money was in the budget. It was just in a different place. So because they're contracted paras instead of hired paras, we had to move between line items, but net, we're not over in the budget. It was just a flip between the two line items, if that helps.
It's not your typical transfer. It was a transfer ahead of time for a service that we weren't going to do unless we could do the transfer because there was a gap in personnel.
So it went from personnel to the special education line, and I get it. So you're saying there was money allocated in the personnel services line for paras, specifically for special education. that you could not hire, now you had to go on contract, and that's why it moved.
Correct, yeah, and in that line, you're not seeing the personnel, you're only seeing the services. If I combined the personnel, you wouldn't see a gap at all. Special ed personnel. They're within their budget. And I'm happy to provide that as a supplement because we've provided some information to the board and we're doing monthly reports out to the board about where they are in relation to their budget, so.
So no other, so just so I'm 150% clear, no other department, no other function, no other school, no other anything is being affected by this transfer.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So wherever you want to pick
Sure.
up.
So those are the big picture items. Again, the fixed charges are following the trends, which is the health insurances and other insurances related to other staffing shortages. In addition, in our pupil personnel expense, I think I just went over that. We're expected to be within budget, with the exception of the transfer, but that's going to be covered in Q2. School expenses, these support instruction activities at the building level, and we're currently projecting the schools will utilize their full budget with the exception of copying, which is a source of the $4,000 balance. We may see that go up because we're implementing some new strategies with paper cut to monitor paper usage from a full print management perspective, so not just copiers, but printers, and we're looking at implementing that, or we have been starting to implement that this year. In maintenance, operations, and transportation, the $4 million is budgeted for utilities, but we typically hold that flat because, we had some warm days recently that we just turned cold. It's tough to predict utilities this early in the year, so that's being held flat. We're working with the town on the rates.
Okay, we're hearing about all these utility increases. Are your utility costs by contract so that what they're going to be, or are you riding the market with the rest of the residents of the state of Connecticut?
Yeah, we're riding the market. We went out of contract in December of last year, but we are working with the town because they're looking at going back into contract for, I believe, electricity with the consultant, our energy consultant. We're also have implemented a software that's able to track and better predict our energy usage through algorithm that's copywritten, but we gave them 5 years of data and they were hitting it on the nail on the head with the amounts when you did a retro look based on their methodology. So we're in the process of implementing that so we can then deploy solutions. So where we see higher usage of a specific type of energy in one building, we can kind of get a best practice, manage our solar and look at where we can deploy more solar and things like that with the town.
But I think the concern, the uncertainty of what what we're hearing in the news about what the utilities rates could be going into the winter with inflation, it's a concern. And I commend this board for looking, we passed our budget, inflation was at one point, by the time it came to you, it looked like it had already risen and there was some uncertainty for this year. And I think that the board is concerned about that line item. We don't really know where we are right now. We are monitoring usage better and having better capacity than in the past, but there is still a lot of uncertainty of what the rate is coming to.
Yeah, because if you guess utilization correctly, it's not taking into account the price of it, so,
Right.
So I guess we'll have more information next quarter.
In Q2, yeah, and then refined in Q3. But yeah, and we are, like I said, looking closely at it and concerned. But right now you're just seeing it flat. So that surplus could go down as we refine that projection. And we did have a little bit of an aggressive assumption built into the budget knowing this, but I don't think it was aggressive enough knowing what we know now. Capital, the largest portion of the capital budget is technology equipment, and almost 70% of that budget has already been expended. The Director of Information Technology typically holds aside a portion for spring spending so that she can handle anything that comes her way, should she need to, or deploy it for the anticipated projects. So that's about what we would expect. There's an additional $373K budgeted for school and department equipment replacement, and their expenditures are need-based and mainly purchased in spring, but we do have exceptions because we don't want people to have to wait for the things that they really need. The next page is just that high-level summary where it's page 3. We're going to continue to show you quarter by quarter so that you can have an easy way to look at, what happened to our personnel projection, and we can explain it from quarter to quarter and fixed charges, et cetera. We always show the unencumbered balance down below if anybody wants to tie out to the Munis reports, just because we tend to look at it because we look at that 5-year trend of where we are relative to those particular major classifications to make sure there's nothing that's popping strangely. And then the next set of pages is just a little bit more detail. If you wanted to drill down and see what's driving the personnel surplus balance or fixed charges, you can see it's mainly health insurance because we have, those vacancies. And I would just conclude there and see if there are additional questions.
I just want to ask a quick question. So can you update us where the school population is after the first quarter? Obviously, you found out who was going to be here, versus where you budgeted for the number of students that went into the budget?
I mean, I think the total number of students was 40 students off, so we were pretty much where we budgeted for.
Did it require you to hire additional teachers in certain sections, or no? Okay, so there's no change in that?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Very minor change in paraprofessionals. It was like a 0.2 and a 0.2 of a person just to reflect need in part of our regular process. So it's a plus 0.4, and we had a minus 0.1, 1.0 in another title. So net, we're negative in FTEs as of our October 1 enrollment. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. I want to ask about the retirements. And so my question is, so we had more retirements than anticipated, and we have an overall shortage of teachers. So the retirements contributed to the teacher shortage, which is not a good thing because we wanted to have those teachers, and we'll continue to budget for those in the future. But the additional retirements create a benefit in terms of pay differential, right? Which is, that doesn't go away. Can you quantify the savings from the pay differential versus what you had budgeted?
Yes, the board did ask us to do that. And so our budget reflected a staff replacement for retirees of $780,000 total. And we saw a savings of $1.4 million on the certified staff. So that's an average of $33,000 per new hire, replacing a retiree. And it was for 41 staff. Our initial budget was 20. If you'll recall through the budget process, as Ms. Vitale reminded me, we refined that to afford some of the increases that we saw in the rates that were unexpected for health insurance and a few other items that came up throughout the budget process, like fuel, for example. So the budget currently reflected 780, and we saw about 1.4 million. We also went back 8 years and looked at the historical trend with retirees and attrition. And our average, retiree savings, if you included the COVID years, was about $848,000 or $800,000 if you took out those 2 years. So, we've historically seen a high, it fluctuates. But this was unprecedented. Our average number of retirees over that period of time was 25. And based on the trends with the age and what we'd expect of, the age of the individuals based on the past, this was unprecedented. I don't anticipate that it will continue into next year, and it's something that we're looking really closely at as we build this year's budget because of the fact that they're now gone. So.
But I guess my question is, so you said it was 780 you budgeted, and it turned out to be 1.4?
Correct.
So that's 600. So that 620,000 is sort of in the bank at that. Like that won't go away if we hire additional teachers. So that's the pure rate differential, And that would have presumably a carry forward effect into future budgets, right? Because we maintain those staff that are newer in their careers, right?
Correct.
Okay, so that's fine, and I understand we had unprecedented retirements, and it's consistent with everything else that you said, so I understand that, but that's helpful. I guess my other question is around the health insurance, because so I understand that we'll have health insurance savings because we have vacancies, but I'm trying to connect the dots. So when we started the budget process, we were worried about a big hole in health insurance. And so I would think maybe the vacancies would be making that hole go away, but now we're actually down to a savings. So can you kind of connect the dots there?
Yeah, so the big chunk of the health insurance, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me in terms of dollars, so I'm going to speak broadly, and then I can give you further information follow-up after this. But health insurance went up the rate was, I believe, a 10% increase this year, but it was offset by savings in the dental program. So and it was significant, so there was a significant reduction in dental that afforded a big chunk of that increase. In addition, our methodology in the past.
And I'm sorry, and the dental savings, you became aware of that after the budget was passed?
Correct.
Okay,
yeah.
so that you're saying the dental savings took care of that hole we thought we had on the health side?
A portion, only
a portion. Okay.
And I don't have my sheet, so the numbers were, I want to say it was 800,000 that we had to find for health insurance.
Right.
There was a savings of 300 to the positive around in dental. And then the gap, the 500,000 was the retirements that were identified.
So that would bring us to zero, but
and
we
that
still have a savings,
And
though.
that had filled the hole for the change in the rate at that time.
Got it.
And we've since had more retirements and a differential in attrition and.
Okay, so those are retirements, and that was significant enough to not only make up the hole, but to produce this, what was it, $450,000 or something?
Yeah, because our methodology in the past had been to include a portion of vacancies in our, so when we build our health insurance number, we take everybody that's active as of a set date, usually December 1, and we roll them forward with a few minor adjustments for what typically happens throughout the year. You know, we see births typically happen throughout the year a little bit more, so we make a minor adjustment. And then we add a certain number of vacancies because it's a point in time, and we typically grow at least by about 5 staff between the December period to when we're doing this again next year. So from an annualized perspective, that's worked before, but we're revisiting that with this attrition number as it is now, whether we just budget the full active staff and not budget the vacancies so that it could potentially reflect a more realistic number next year.
Thank you, and I don't want to monopolize, but just one follow-up question. So the $450,000, does that assume that we will not fill any more existing vacancies, or that's a projection assuming that we're able to, take out some subs and actually hire these teachers?
Yeah, there was an assumption we would hire, and it's not all of the vacancies, but there was an assumption of a net increase of, I believe it was 5 or 6.
Okay.
At a blended level, whether they were single, individual plus one, or family. Yeah, so we'll continue to monitor it.
So that 450 is a projection.
Correct.
Based on, got it.
Correct, yeah. It's
based
close.
On assuming that we will be able to hire some additional.
Correct, and then prorating it based on what we're assuming those dates would be.
All right, thank you so much. Mr. Walsh?
Following up on the questions that Chairwoman Charlton asked, you were saying that, so we seem to be whole on the insurance, correct? More than whole. There's a surplus there now.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Do we ever hire teachers or try to hire teachers that try to fill holes that have experience? They're not young teachers coming in, or is it impossible to do that?
No, we do hire teachers that are a higher level. So it's
Okay.
not like every replacement teacher is going to be,
Yeah.
straight out of school.
But the contract we have dictates what they get paid, right? You can't offer them a premium to come in, can you?
There is experience, that comes into what they're hired at, and we have a step system, so years being with you adds to your salary. So if I have my master's degree and I've been here for 2 years versus Christine, who has her master's in 2 years, she'll be making more than me through the negotiated, contract structure.
Yeah, so the contract's the contract, whatever degrees they have, whatever seniority they have, it's pretty much a calculation, correct? But if we needed a special science teacher, we can't say, we're willing to pay $20,000 more a year to get this specialty in.
No, there's different, I apologize, the Human Resources Director isn't here. For hard-to-fill areas, there is in the contract, special education teachers, sciences, I think math, and maybe some of the languages are compensated in a way for the specialty or hard-to-fill category. But I can get back to you on how that works, because I don't know.
I think you've answered it enough. I don't need to drill down on, but there is an ability to do that for a hard-to-fill position. All right, that's all I have for right now.
Mr. Testani?
Yeah, hi, I just have a question on page 8. So the percent used in that column, is that the percent for this quarter? Am I following that right?
Yes, correct. That's as of 10/3, which as a proxy for our September 30th date.
Oh, okay, so just out of my own curiosity, we're line number 315 with rentals, there's a deficit there of 16,000. What is, I just happened to notice that. What does that comprise of? What are rentals? What does that mean?
So that's a transfer that needs to have, if you look under the school expense line, I believe, the 315.
Yeah, yes, I see.
But rentals and pupil personnel are for the Bridgeport the CPP program, as well as we rent off-site for swimming, for physical education for phys ed for special education students.
Well, okay, just to follow that up for a second. So right now, that line is 194.19% above the percentage used, right, because of that deficit. Is that going to be offset later in the year? I'm not sure I understand how it relates to that school expense line.
Yes, I believe, I don't want to misspeak, so I'm going to say I believe that it's just that an expense is hitting a wrong code, that it should be hitting school expense, so I'll check on that and I'll correct that for Q2. The other possibility, as I'm thinking through, is that we have revenues that we receive later in the year, and journals happen from the expenditure line to transfer that expense to a grant as it becomes available. We're trying to do that more real time so that we don't wait, but that could be the case with that line, so I can get back to you on that.
Yeah, no, and I noticed there's a few lines, just rentals was an odd one for me, but there's several that are, above the percentage for the quarter, but is it safe to say that that's going to even out over the year?
Yeah, so for example, the big one, 2.7 million in tuitions. That's because we go ahead and contract with all of our tuitions through the Board of Ed budget, meaning the town funds, the Board of Education funds, and then we offset it with the excess cost revenue. So whenever I show my projected numbers, it includes that excess cost revenue, which this year has become more predictable for us because legislatively the state has agreed to reimburse us at a fixed percent, whereas before it was variable. Our percent reimbursement is 70% of eligible expenses, and so we're projecting that I think we'll get 3.4 million, which will offset mainly tuitions.
Thank you, Mr. Testani.
Can I just ask a couple quick questions following up on Mr. Testani?
Of course, go ahead.
So this excess cost used to be a big deal. So they've changed it because we used to have to do applications in, I think, December, previous years. We still have to do that? Okay, so
Yes.
does it matter how many applications we have based to get the reimbursement, or is it more on the expenses you spend as a district that they're now reimbursing you on?
So the formula is from last year's overall per pupil expense. So if our per pupil was 20,000, you get reimbursed on any costs in excess of 4.5 times that amount. So in December, you take all of the children receiving or students receiving services, and then you divide them up prorated amongst the appropriate kids, and then you come up with the total, and then that amount totals down to the bottom that's above, and you do an adjustment in March, and that's when they give us the funding is in March.
Okay, so we won't.
But the state this year, they tiered it based on wealth of the town. So based on what your wealth is, that's the rate of reimbursement. So in years past, there would be some uncertainty of how much we would be reimbursed. Now we know it's 70%. Now, there is some talk at the state level that the state put a millions, I forget the number, I don't want to quote a wrong number, but millions and millions of dollars to fund the excess cost. And based on the tiered system, and their numbers are that there's extra money in that pot right now. So there's some question on what's going to happen with that money, and possibly being addressed in.
I think that's just a really important point, why a lot of times there's a perception that, well, not that are one part of the reason our special ed costs were so volatile was because we could swing between 70 and 82% reimbursement based on that overall pot, because they never said it. So depending on how much money there was and the universe of ask, that's how much we would get. And it could swing us $1 million. So right now, last year, we were reimbursed 82%, and this year we're 70. That 12% is worth almost $500,000. So
you'll do your applications in like the December time period, but we really won't hear how you did with that until like March, you said, so we won't really find it out till the third quarter.
yeah, but we've been working really closely with the person who does it, and I feel comfortable that, we're within a plus or minus margin that, as long as the state doesn't change the reimbursement, which it could do, the total expenses, we have a decent sense of.
All right, because I knew that was a volatile number in the past, so, all right. And just one last question on the retirement. This unprecedented number of retirements, I think I heard you say, number one, we're not out of the ordinary, right? This is happening to all districts, one. And number two, do you see this continuing in the future after this year?
We look forward to having those conversations as part of the budget. So as we develop the budget, we just did our big roll forward, and then the really fine points, which are the attrition and retirement assumptions. I'm spending just, days on where I'm focused on that. So we haven't gotten there yet, so I can't speak to that yet. Yeah.
Hopefully not. I mean, we've 40 retirees, and with that comes a wealth of knowledge and investment into our teachers. And really hoping that this next year, our teachers feel, the love and the respect, and hopefully more of a normal year, and are with us for years to come, because it's a hit to a district. While there is a financial benefit of it, it does come with an opportunity cost. So
Is this happening in other districts, or just, or
I mean,
are we
we
hitting
were
it
just
harder?
at, we were just at CABE, the board, this past weekend, and other districts are having similar challenges. Maybe not the same number, but comparatively speaking, yes.
I went to a workshop on this exact question. And as I mentioned in past meetings, this is something that I'm sure everyone here has noticed is happening across the whole economy. We are in a position where, a lot of industries are having difficulty finding qualified employees. It's just, this is a kind of epicenter of a trend, but, yeah.
Madam Chair, can I just follow up on that?
Yes.
Just curious, with the people that leave, Christine, is there, like in the corporate world, there's like exit interviews? Would you say number one, does that happen now? So we have more of an idea of exactly why, let's say 40, right, left or retired. Was it mostly salary? Was it a combination of things? I'm just curious, and I'm guessing these people some were attempted to be persuaded not to leave. Would that be fair to say?
I can't really speak I think it was a variety of things. We do take exit interviews when staff leaves. I think that for retirements are a little bit different, that it was really just they made a decision to leave, at the end of the career. Mr. Peterson, feel free to jump in if I'm
No,
missing.
as I mentioned, I went to a workship on this at the conference that we just attended, and the one interesting thing that I took away from the it was a labor lawyer who was giving the class, said, in the 2008 financial crisis, a lot of people were talking about, now I'm in a financial position where I can't retire, I'm going to have to work longer. But in this round, what he's seeing a lot more of in the narrative is I can afford to accelerate my retirement rather than put it off, and I think so that's a trend that he's seen in his work.
And when you say accelerate retirement and the people that did leave, were the majority of them at the point where they would collect their pension? Is that part of the decision-making process? I'm just trying to figure out, obviously 40 is a high number, and it sounds like it might be somewhat higher than some other municipalities. So I'm just trying to figure out, was there something that could have been done to maybe lessen that number a little bit, if not this past round, perhaps in the near future?
We can get you that additional information because I do believe the HR director has reported that. I just don't want to misquote her, and I think we should look at other districts. I do know anecdotally, talking to my other school business manager colleagues, they have said, double what they planned as well. So just anecdotally, I could say that that's what I've heard from many people. And I mean, as hard as it was for all of us during the pandemic, when you talk to teachers that were in front of the kids, they went through it, they did it, they got to the end of it, they stuck with us, and then they were ready to, start their retirement, I think, in general. It was hard.
And that was because they made it to their first year of pension eligibility, I guess was part of my question.
We can get that data, 25 years, and is the TRB right for pension time?
You want me to help you out with that one?
That would be great, Mike, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just I had my hand up. I know you probably can't see it. So as someone who's part of the teacher retirement board system, there is no financial advantage to staying when you hit the number for full retirement. At that point, you're then paying into the system as well as union dues and everything else, which then makes it not advantageous to stay on and teach once you've hit that magical number. So you have a lot of longevity in towns like Fairfield of teachers that have been in the system a long time, and when they hit that magic number, there is really no advantage to attract them to stay longer. They're going to pay into a retirement system that they've already maxed out.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Boy, you guys look tired. Thank you sorry for the long delay at the beginning of the meeting, but thank you for hanging in with us. And by the way, I was just going to mention, I have to mention this article that I just crossed yesterday. Connecticut schools in crisis amid long-term burnout and demoralization among teachers. This is definitely not just a Fairfield issue.
No, it's not. And for retirement, I mean, if you can afford to, after, potentially going back during a pandemic, for those teachers that, maybe have some other health concerns, I think that it adds a level that we haven't seen in years past. So on that note, I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
And thank you to all of our teachers who might be listening.
Thank you so much. We'll see you guys soon.
Madam Chairwoman, could we take a 2-minute bio break since 10:30? Thanks.
Yes, we will
And
take a
just
break
keep Ms.
for,
Bossy
how about 5
2
minutes?
5 minutes longer. Do you guys like being last? Yeah, I'm sure there are. You can get your presentation You can nail your presentation. Feeling great.
Mary is back. All right, we have a quorum of them here. So before we move on, I want to make a motion. I want to make a motion to postpone item 7, which is to hear an update on capital projects, to our next meeting, which I believe is on December 6th. Just bear with me for a moment. And the reason being that Mr. Schmidt, who is not here, was supposed to walk us through that item, and so I don't think there's any point in addressing it. So if that's okay with the board, can I have a second on that? Mr. Mottola, all in favor? Mr. Walsh, Mr. Stark, Mr. Curley, Ms. Charlton, Mr. Mottola, Ms. Marmion, Mr. DeWitt, and Ms. LeClaire. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Let's move on then to item 6, to review the town's Q1 financial position. Same error in the agenda item. We're reviewing September, obviously, not June. So can I have a motion to hear this item? Mr. Walsh, seconded by Mr. Curley. The materials for this item begin on page 62 of the posted backup online. And Frank and Caitlin, thank you for being here. I know it's late. I'll turn this over to you.
Okay, good evening, everybody. We'll start where we always do on the summary projected net estimated operational variance sheet. Just to cut to the chase, we're looking at about a $2.5 million estimated increase in fund balance to the good as of Q1. Again, this is a summary item. So these are to the best of our ability at this point in time through September. And actually, we've looked at it up through today just to make sure nothing has drastically changed. If we start on the revenue side, as always, the current prior year interest, the biggest number in our budget, you're going to see a favorable of about $500,000. This is an amount that you guys actually spoke about on your November 1st meeting due to the senior tax credits. I believe Mr. Murray gave you guys a presentation, and it's coming in about the 509 or so was his number. I just rounded it to 500,000. So that's really what that represents, because he did confirm we had budgeted of about 4 million, and it came in at about 3.6. So just to kind of summarize that whole scenario. In addition, just to let you know, we do obviously track monthly the tax collector collections report. He's running about 75 basis points above last year. But again, as you guys know, the collection rate was also increased this year. So the collection rate last year was budgeted at the 98.71, even though it came in at the higher 99. But the budgeted collection rate in fiscal 23 is the 98.9. So even though we're running above, our collection rate is budgeted higher. So the only number I'm really including at this point is the favorability for the senior tax relief that you guys know about already. So again, we do track that every month, looking at, to see if there's any swings, but that's what that number represents as of today, really, because the collection, well, not today, the collection report that we looked at was as of the end of October. So the other big line items I kind of left on here, even though they're zero, just to kind of show that we've looked at them. We did get a report for, we're tracking the investment income. Obviously, it's really early in the year. We do have an RFP out for a financial advisor that we're hoping to have someone in the next few weeks, hopefully. So we're going to have a new kind of game plan on the investment piece. Conveyance. Betsy was kind enough to give me a report. They are, let's see, they are down in the number of transfers, as everyone would know. So she's basically saying, as of now, she thinks she's going to be on budget for all of her conveyance taxes. Again, it's early in the fiscal year. So we're just kind of watching that at this point. Building permits, again, there's a new building official. He's basically pretty much thinking he's going to be on track for the moment. We will talk a little bit when we get to the fire marshal fees. I probably should have moved that up, but because he is going to be over, but I'll get to that in a second. Park and Rec revenue, Mr. Calabrese is actually on the phone or on WebEx. We're projecting about a $230,000 increase over budget, projected over budget. The main driver of that is $70,000 in their programs line. If you guys recall, as of September, anything over $200,000 gets turned over to the town. So there was a budgeted number of about $100,000, and the actual through September was $170,000. So that's the largest piece of the $230,000. Smaller numbers, Penfield rental is about $15,000 over, projecting Jackie Durrell to be about $46,000 over, and projecting beach parking to be over as well. But again, early in the season, they basically have half of their season done because of the summer of '22 being done, but they still have the '23 Memorial Day through June 30. So that's his slight revenue overage. Fire marshal fees, obviously, if you guys know, the budget was decreased significantly from fiscal '22. The '22 budget, I believe, was $400,000. The fiscal '23 budget is $150,000. So they are already, where are they already? I think they're actually, they're at $124,000 as of November 1st. So the two largest projects that came in, one was for $44,000, was for Fairfield U. I believe it was a dorm. And there was a $32,000 project for Ash Creek. I think their apartments over there, 219 Ash Creek. The other projects that they're watching, which again goes back to building permits as well, there's a medical building at 4185 Black Rock Turnpike. There's a large apartment building, about 100 units at 5545 Park Avenue. There's another possible one, Black Rock Turnpike, another 100. They're waiting on the Beach Road, the Masonic Temple, but it's going to court, so they're not sure if that one's going to come to fruition. Castle and Berwick, 44-unit apartment building, needs to go through P&Z. Daycare, One Post Road, and that 15 Umpqua that Mr. Devanzo was speaking about was denied as of now, I guess. So those are just ones that were kind of, I think, in their horizon. So they're projecting to be $100,000 over budget for '23. The biggest driver, as you're going to see, is the next one, is state revenue. We got $1 million more in municipal revenue share, and it's already in the bank. So so basically the state gives out all of their pilot payments, and then the remaining amount that's left in the municipal revenue sales account is distributed to the municipalities, and that's what this $1 million represents. So I guess maybe that's great news for us. So literally, it's in the bank. We received it in October. So that's not an estimate. That's a real number. So that's the biggest driver on this sheet.
So, Caitlin, can I just ask you a question? So when we found out about the extra pilot money last year, I thought the budget was already passed and we factored it in to the mill rate calculation, right? Am I remembering that right? So shouldn't we see the pilot money be showing up in these numbers or no? How does that work? Because the extra pilot money, which we factored into the mill rate calculation, wasn't budgeted as revenue.
I believe we did. I believe the way we did it, that we did end up putting it in as revenue.
How could we do?
I could take a look at it.
Yeah.
I think it's just going to be something in the mechanics, but I think what we have here, it wasn't related to that.
Right,
some
I
separate.
understand this is different. I guess I just thought that, that mechanically that would show up as an overage because we didn't change the budget. The budget was already approved by the RTM at that point, so we just, factored it into the collection rate somehow, or the mill rate calculation somehow manually. So anyway, that's why I was curious about that, but, okay.
Yeah, I'll take a look.
Yeah, that's fine. Anybody have questions on revenue? Mr. Curley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Caitlin, thank you for that. That was a helpful summary. Just had a couple of questions. On the investment income line, you had mentioned that there's an RFP out for a new financial advisor. Can you just add a little color to what's going on there?
Sure. So in the past, we didn't have one. And so basically, the CFO was tasked with finding the best rates. So literally, we have money market accounts, we have investment accounts. We have an investment policy. So everything we do, we're really structured by the state statute. There's not a lot really that you can really do with general fund cash. So everything we have is obviously in line with that. So we have about maybe 4 to 5 large investment firms that we've been using. So we put it out to bid to say, hey, what can you do for us? What are the best rates you can get? I know it's an uncertain environment, but so we conducted interviews last week. I think it was 5 firms. We had some follow-up questions, so they're now providing answers to those questions, and then we might have another round of interviews depending on what those questions come back with.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And then if I understood the $100,000 on the fire marshal line, it wasn't so much that the numbers year over year are up, it's that the budget was lowered, and that's the positive variance, right? I heard that correctly? Okay.
Yeah, just to give you a sense, so the budget last year was $400,000, our actual was $365,000. We were watching it on the quarterly, and we ended up coming close, but the budget is now much lower. Yeah, not knowing the uncertainty.
Yeah, and that was my recollection as well, because I remember the fire chief talking about just uncertainty about development. I think that was the point that you had made, Jim, in the budget meetings. And then last question on the state revenue line, you mentioned that that's in the bank, received in October. This is as of a September 30th statement. So is the million there just the projection of what was to be received and then it actually was? I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah, so what I do is I try to project out our year end. So if I use the September information, but if I know something that's happened after that, before today's meeting, I will incorporate it into what I know, because this is a projection. But in this case, it's in the bank, so that's a hard and fast number.
Okay, that's good to understand, because I would not have expected a statement that reads as of September 30th to include that. I would have expected that to be a snapshot as of September 30th, but that's helpful, so I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Well, to that point, on that state sheet, I think it's the one right behind it, we do estimate what we're going to get in. And if I do have actuals, I will put the actual in that estimated column, just to give it more actual numbers. Like, for example, like LoSiP, it came in $811 lower. Like, I just put in, if there's an actual, I just put in the actual.
Other questions on revenue? Just a quick one. On the investment income, I thought, maybe it's just early, I thought we might be seeing some upside in there just because the way rates have moved. I can't remember the assumptions we used when we were budgeting, but I didn't think we built the upside in that we've been seeing so far. So, I mean, I'm assuming we're just sort of keeping that conservative at the moment. But
we are. To Mr. Curley's point, this is actual. So we do mark-to-market quarterly.
Mm-hmm.
So there's basically 3 lines that incorporate our investment income. It's the dividends, then it's the change in the market value, and then there's a bank fee, but it's $50,000. So just to give you a feel, the budgeted numbers for fiscal 23 are about $628,000 for the 3 of those combined. Our actual interest from July through September was $223,000, but our mark-to-market was 103, so it gave us a positive 120. So it's actually not even, we're at 19.2% of our budget as of September.
But,
So
and
it's
that
actually
mark to
lower.
market, that's just unrealized, that's an unrealized
Yes.
loss on the bond, so that's not.
And
okay.
don't forget, so we accrue at the end of June, so that's incorporates the reversal of that number as well.
Got it, okay. But
'Cause we
the-
only accrue our-
But
our-
the real cash interest is running,
Yes,
whatever,
we're
200.
at 32% of our budget as of September.
Gotcha, thank you. All right, expenses?
Okay, on the expense line, your biggest number here is vacancy churn. So we've talked about, staffing issues throughout the whole meeting. We have a bunch of vacancies and some churn. This is our projection through the end of June. I can list off as of now. This list kind of changes. We have about 10 open positions for the town at the moment, full-time open positions. Most of them being actively, open. Again, within those 10 are the 2 positions from HR that are not budgeted to start until January. So that includes that. There is also an HR generalist. There's a DPW finance person. There's a assistant purchasing director. We have a little bit of churn in our RAP department. There's some musical chairs going on. Our RAP person is going down to the sewer, and so we just hired someone who's starting Monday. So there's just timing and salary differences. There's an IT field engineer, plus some churn in other positions there. DPW has 2 laborers and a mechanic. There's a building inspector, as you guys probably know. We have an acting, and then we have an inspector below that. There's 1 police. There's a clerk in the tax collector department who should be starting Monday, I believe, and the half year for the social worker for the police department that was also approved. So given the vacancies, what I'm finding in talking to people is they're having a tough time finding qualified people. So hence the number of days that the position is open. But the real risk is, what's the salary going to be once they do find someone? It might be higher than budgeted. So, but we don't really know until we find the person. So Dave Kelly, I know in IT, and someone else, the building guy, said they're having a tough time finding qualified people.
Madam Chair, this is a quick question on that.
Yes.
Caitlin, on the police opening, is that for an officer, or is that social work position we approved?
There's a
or what is
secretary.
that?
There's a secretary, I believe, open in the police department.
So it's not the social work position we approved, that's been filled? Is that?
That was a half-year social worker one. I think, did that start in January as well, or was that, I'm not sure.
I think so,
I think
yeah.
it
Okay.
did, yes, yeah.
Yeah, but I know there's a secretary position open.
That's currently open, yeah, I think it's the chief's, right, okay.
Thank you. I was actually going to ask the same thing. So because I recall last year, we had something like 9 vacancies. So they've all been filled. That's great news.
There's been a lot of
Yeah.
filling, and a lot of these are, the open space manager left, the building inspector moved up. The DPW finance one has been open for a while. HR's had a lot of turnover in a lot of theirs. The purchasing director's leaving, the assistant left. So there's been a lot of.
The purchasing director?
Yes.
Gerald?
Gerald is retiring in January. His job, I believe, was either posted the other day or will be posted this
Oh,
week.
I didn't know that. Okay. Yeah, this 750, I didn't look at prior quarters, but that's much higher than we typically see at this point. I feel like that number's usually 500 at the end of the year.
It's normally
Yeah.
around 500. Frank and I did a little, we dug a little deeper. Munis right now, because we encumber everybody's full salary, is showing $1 million, but that doesn't take into consideration anyone else being hired for the remainder of the year. So the 750 might be a little bit high, but given the fact that they're just finding it hard to hire people, it's just every single day gets more favorable. But the real question is, what's the salary going to be once they do get hired?
Yeah. Okay. Questions? Did you want to address Parks and Rec expense, or?
Yes, so there's a slight unfavorable park and rec expense. Basically, 3 different items kind of making that up. $15,000 is due to increased parties at Penfield from July through October 31st is when I believe it actually shut down. $6,000 was over due to new bids for beach stickers, so that's a waterfront printing and binding expense. And the seasonal payroll for waterfront, they're estimating to be over by $125,000 due to increased staff trainings and additional staffing that was needed at the beach this past summer. And Anthony is on if you guys want to ask him any more questions.
Any question, Mr. Walsh?
And that normally happens when the revenue goes up, there's more expenses, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, last
okay.
year we had the same issue. But if anyone wants to ask Anthony, he's looking really happy to be here
Anthony, it
tonight
looks
at
like you
11
want to. It
p.m.
looks like you want to say something. So.
Caitlin answered, thank you, though. Caitlin answered the same way I was going to say. Mr. Walsh is right. When typically the expenses go up when the revenue goes up. So that's exactly what it was.
All right. Any other questions on these, on this estimate? Okay.
Just two more items now that actually came up in listening to things that are now going to be on our radar for Q2 is the transportation. So I'm not sure, I have not spoken to Courtney on the private transportation side, whether we're going to see any of the favorability that she's seeing on the public side. So I just had a quick conversation with her. She doesn't know yet. So we'll try to touch base before Q2 to see if that comes to fruition or not. And the other thing I'm going to be talking to Frank about at some point is he mentioned there could be favorability. So ECC has a new fund, but they haven't fully, Westport's not on board yet. So potentially our share of that gets transferred over to that fund, possibly there could be some favorability there depending on how that all pans out, the timing of that new center with Westport coming over.
Okay, thank you. And just you reminded me, based on the Board of Ed discussion, I assume you guys are going to be keeping an eye on utilities as well.
Yeah, nothing that we've seen yet so far, but again, our winter months are normally where we see a lot of our heating costs and electricity. And because of the lag in our bills, we might only have two, I don't even know if we have September in yet, so.
All right. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. All right, so we're going to move on. Having postponed item 7, we'll move on to item 8, which is to hear an update on the Internal Service Fund as of June 30th, 2022. Can I have a motion to hear this item? Mr. Stark, seconded by Mr. Curley. So thank you for preparing this, Caitlin, and just for the board's benefit, we had a lot of discussion about this fund during the budget last year, and at the time we had the budget discussion, we were looking at an estimate as of June 30th, 2022, and a further estimate at 2023. So I did want to make sure we had a chance to see at least how the 2022 estimate came out as compared to those numbers we sort of based our judgment on in the budget process. And if I recall correctly, Caitlin, this the fund balance, this $6 million, that's about spot on to the estimate that you had given us during the budget, right?
Yeah, so basically, it didn't really fluctuate a lot from last year.
Yep.
The change was $64,000. I believe one of our accruals went up and one went down, so, yeah. I think
Yeah, it looks like the general liability went down, and maybe the insurance went up, but, all right. So I don't know if anybody has any questions on this. All right. So thank you. With that, we can move on to item 9, which is to hear, consider, and act upon the minutes of September 26th.
Madam Chairwoman, can I just ask you a question about the quarterly in general?
Of course.
Is there a reason we didn't get an update on the pension funds and the OPEB?
Yes, I apologize. So Ms. Trabucco was not available, nor was anyone else on her board. So we asked them to, we asked if they could be available in December.
Sure.
And Ms. Trabucco is not available in December, so I'm hoping we will get someone else from from the pension board in December, but I haven't heard back yet.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you for reminding me about that. All right, so item 9 is to hear, consider, and act upon the minutes of September 26, 2022. Can I have a motion to hear this item? Ms. Marmion, seconded by Mr. Mottola. Okay, so just board members may recall that these minutes were postponed from our November 1st meeting. Mr. Testani wanted to make some changes that he didn't have ready at the meeting, and there was some confusion about the revisions, and our recording secretary sent out a revised draft that should not have been done. So I think you may all recall.
I recused myself that night.
And you're not here, so
I've got to step out of the room on this matter.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, and we're just going to adjourn after that, so if you want to. We're not kicking you out or anything, Jim, but.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, so. Okay. So, yeah, happy Thanksgiving. So there was some confusion about the revisions. There shouldn't have been a revised draft sent out. I think everybody might recall that we had some very robust discussion about the topic of revising minutes during our 2 meetings in February. And the process that we talked about was that if someone has a change to the minutes, they will raise that change in a motion at the meeting. And Jack, you didn't have that ready, so you can make that motion tonight. We shouldn't be asking the recording secretary to make changes, and we even specified during that time that even Ms. Marmion as secretary should not be asking the recording secretary to make changes. We would bring changes up for a vote to the board during a meeting. So, with that said, we can start with the original minutes, which were distributed, and take up our motions to amend these.
Ms. Chairman?
Yes?
There's a copy of the minutes in our backup, and then at least I received another email today with another document called supplemental backup. So which one are we looking at?
The supplemental. So the original backup included the minutes that were revised. And so as I mentioned, what we should be working on is the original minutes. And the way they get revised is by board members making a motion and then that motion being voted on, not by giving.
I totally understand the process. I just want to make sure we're
Yeah.
all talking about the same piece of paper.
So the supplemental minutes, so the supplemental backup is the original minutes. And those are the same minutes that we had at our last meeting that were postponed. So we're going to start with those, and any changes to those can be voted on by the board. Mr. Curley?
The individual document that I have called supplemental backup
Right.
are not the original minutes, because they have a reference to the YouTube page which those minutes did not have, and they no longer say that I called for a motion to call the meeting. So I think the correct ones are the ones in the document called 1122 backup for Board of Finance quarter. Those are the original
Caitlin,
minutes that
I
Mr. Testani asked to be moved forward, I believe.
original minutes that we received in the backup were already revised. So I had asked that the original minutes without the revisions be posted, and I think that's what's in the supplemental backup. Ms. Bossi, is that correct?
That's what I understood. I believe if you look, what I was told, that the major change is if you look at agenda item number 3, there's 2 little sentences, but then there's a paragraph on the original as part of the big backup that you got. That is not on the supplemental minutes that were sent out today. I was told that was basically the only change.
Okay. Perfect. Okay.
And Madam Chair, can I?
Yes.
Yeah, and first to Mr. DeWitt's point and everyone else, I want to apologize. I think I circumvented or maybe misunderstood the process. I reached out to Prue after our last meeting, and so I certainly apologize if I didn't follow the right procedure. I had wanted, or in conjunction with Prue, who was very patient and kind, in the phone conversation we had, sort of went over what I was looking to try to accomplish in the change in the minutes that I should have asked for a motion in the last meeting to revise. So I'll make that motion now, if that's okay.
Yeah, and that's fine. I just want to make sure before you do that, that everybody's on the correct set of minutes. Does everyone have the right document with the original minutes?
Yep.
And just, Madam Chair, the PDF file, the suffix to that long file name includes original _minutes.pdf.
Yes. So it is, again, in the posted backup, it's 11/22/22, supplemental backup for BOF quarterly meeting, original minutes. That's the only thing in that item. Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, all right, Mr. Testani, you go ahead.
And to confuse this a little bit more, basically what was sent out on November 18th did incorporate the change after I talked with Prue, and there was obviously a YouTube recording of what transpired during that meeting. It was conveyed in that set of minutes, or I could just repeat it if that would help.
Yeah,
in
why don't
terms
you
of
read
what
it into the
okay.
record and then we can vote, probably
Okay,
easier.
That's fair. Just bear with me. I'm trying to find the exact wording. Okay, so what was added as a result of that video, and excuse me for the microphone issue here, just trying to make sure I have the wording right.
Just, if you start, Mr. Testani,
Yeah, I'd like
just
to
let us
make
know
a-
where you want to insert it in the minutes.
Yes,
Yep.
so after, let's see. There's a line, I believe in the original minutes, it's starting.
I'm sorry, I cannot hear
Uh,
anything if anyone's talking.
Is that, Chris, can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can.
All right, I apologize for that. And so, but there was no specific location, so I'm reading from the minutes. I'm about to make a motion, but I'm trying to give you an idea of where I'd like this to be inserted. Engineering manager Bill Hurley said this is not a prime property like Tungus Hill or Fairchild Wheeler Golf Course, but it will improve water quality and it will allow for piping to give the area a free flow outlet. The property will be regraded and have access to a culvert. There was a detailed discussion about the use of the property and Aspetuck Land Trust involved in the plans and visions for the property once the mitigation is complete. Then I believe this is the part that I, through Prue, again, just didn't follow the right procedure in terms of adding it to the minutes. Kevin Stark was asking questions unrelated to the bid waiver approval, and Jack Testani asked to bring the meeting to order and focus on the actual approval of the bid waiver to acquire the property. His request led to a contentious exchange between Mr. Stark and Mr. Testani, prompting Mr. Testani to request that Mr. Stark be admonished from the meeting. Ms. Charlton brought the meeting back to order and allowed town attorney James Baldwin to answer Mr. Stark's questions, while at the same time asked that all questions be focused on the bid waiver approval. The full discussion can be accessed by using the link at the top of this document. So that's my motion, to incorporate that few sentences.
Okay, do we have a second? Anyone? I don't see a second. Okay. I would like to make a motion. I believe I explained my, I think I explained my rationale to the board in the last meeting, but in short, while I don't think we need a transcript of the board's discussion, the draft that we were originally provided doesn't include anything in the record that covers the key aspect of the discussion, which is why the board voted to approve the bid waiver. The basis for our vote was that there were appraisals to support the purchase price, and there was quite a bit of discussion on this, but in the interest of keeping it brief and to the point, I thought the easiest way to reflect it in the record was to reference part of my opening statement in the meeting. So I'd like to make a motion to add this language before the paragraph beginning with Mr. Baldwin presented this item. And the language would say, Chairwoman Charlton referenced the posted meeting backup for the bid waiver purchase price of $400,000. Page 1 of the additional backup includes an independent property valuation dated September 15th, 2022 for the 3 parcels being donated to the town in the amount of $825,000. Page 22 of the additional backup includes a copy of the assessor's valuation for all 4 parcels completed in 2020 before the property was subdivided in the amount of $419,000. $419,000. Yeah, that was the second. So can I, is there a second on that amendment? Mr. Mottola, comments, questions? Okay. All in favor of that amendment, please say.
Hello?
Oh, sorry, I didn't crane my neck around to see you. Apologize.
Thank you, Chris DeWitt. Madam Chairman, I will be voting against your change as well. I don't think the meeting minutes need to be amended in any way. We went into this meeting with the concept that this was a general formality that we frankly didn't even know we had to do. And I think that the meeting minutes, in a very general way, by Prue, captures the gist of what happened. And I'll also give a quick explanation why I didn't second Mr. Testani's motion, because we have never, no matter what comments have been made or general terms of, or general discussions that have been had between members have ever been addressed in meeting minutes. So I will not be supporting any changes to these meeting minutes. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. DeWitt. And again, I just, not trying to debate it, I felt that we were called to approve a bid waiver, and there was, the official record includes no information about why we would have approved such a waiver. And the reason is because we had, and I know that you had kindly at one point, Mr. DeWitt, called the vote on that basis because it was like, we've got these appraisals. So I felt, I made this motion because I felt that the record should reflect why this board approved that bid waiver. Any other comments on this? Okay. So with that, can we put this amendment to the vote? All in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Okay. Ms. Marmion, Mr. Mottola, Ms. Charlton, Mr. Curley, Mr. Stark, Ms. LeClaire. Against, Mr. Testani and Mr. DeWitt. Okay, so that is 6, the amendment passes 6-2. Are there any other changes or comments on these minutes? Okay, so with that, I will make a motion to approve the minutes as amended. Can I have a second? Ms. Marmion, all in favor? Mr. Stark, Mr. Curley, Ms. Charlton, Mr. Mottola, Ms. Marmion, Ms. LeClaire. Opposed? Mr. Testani, Mr. DeWitt, did you vote? Oh, in favor. I'm sorry. So Mr. DeWitt in favor. So the minutes are approved 7-1, with Mr. Walsh having excused himself. All right, so we did have an item before adjourning. Probably shouldn't have let Jim go. Item 10, to hear, consider, and act upon any communications. Ms. Bossi, do you have anything? Okay. So I want to let the board know that the senior and disabled tax relief, we discussed forming a committee at our last meeting after we had an update with the tax assessor. Ms. Marmion, Mr. Curley, and Mr. DeWitt stepped up to volunteer to be on the committee. So I want to thank them for that. We look forward to the recommendations on next steps. The other thing I'll quickly update on, from an audit committee perspective, I did have an opportunity to speak briefly with Mr. Centifanti today. The audit is in process. He did let me know that it might be delayed due to a couple of open items, notably the implementation of the lease accounting standard. And also the fact that his firm is having staffing challenges, and I think the individuals that were assigned to the audit quit. They left the firm. So Mr. Centifanti plans to file for an extension with the state to delay the audit to January 31st just in case. But, obviously best efforts will continue. And he did let me know that they would focus on completing the work on the general fund so that we can get the final year-end numbers as soon as possible and determine if there's any change to the surplus that we previously heard about in the October meeting. And if there is, that might result in an action from our board. So does anyone else have any items to discuss? Okay.
Ms. Chairman?
Yes.
I just want to be clear, because I think I've confused everyone. The last vote for the final, after the amendment to the change to the, I voted no. So I raised my hand and then put it down, and then I raised it for no. So just let the record reflect these 6-2.
Thank you for clarifying. Okay, so
Sorry, I apologize if I confused.
No worries. So the minutes were approved 6-2. Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. All right, so does anyone else have if no one else has any other communications, committee updates, we can move to item 11. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Mr. Mottola, seconded by Mr. Testani. All in favor? Aye, it is unanimous. Thank you. Good night, everybody.